call this special meeting of the Howell Township Planning Board to order. Eileen, call the roll, opening statement, please.
I hereby declare this meeting of the Howell Township Planning Board to be open. Adequate notice having been given pursuant to the New Jersey Open Public Meeting Act in the following manner. On July 10th, a copy of said notice was mailed to the Tri-Town News and the Asbury Park Press. On July 10th, a copy of said notice was hand-delivered to the clerk of the Township of Howell. Third, on July 10th, said notice was posted in the office of the Planning Board and on the bulletin board in the Howell Township Municipal Building, 4567 Route 9, Howell Township, New Jersey. In accordance with the Fire Prevention Code and your safety, please be advised that this facility is designed with 2 emergency exits, which are on your right at the front and rear of the meeting room. Furthermore, smoking is not permitted in the municipal building. Please take note that this meeting is being videotaped for possible future broadcast on Howell Township TV 77.
Call the roll, please.
Mr. Boyle,
Present.
Mr. Dorado is going to be late.
No, he's here.
Oh, you made it.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
Here.
Mr. Dorado's present. Mr. Husser is excused. Chief Kudrick.
Here.
Mr. Nicastro.
Here.
Mr. Schneider. Here. Mr. Tannenhouse.
Here.
Mr. Seaman.
Here.
Mr. Everett.
Here.
Deputy Mayor O'Donnell.
Here.
And Chairman Nash.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. At this time, I would like to ask everyone to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, and after that, if you would kindly remain standing for a moment of silence for our troops and our first responders, both here and abroad. Chief? Thank you. Seeing that this is a special meeting, we will move right into hearing the application. And tonight, we're hearing case number SP 1052, Monmouth Commerce Center. It's a preliminary and final major site plan with ancillary bulk variances. This application of Monmouth Commerce Center LLC as applicant, and Lawrence Katz and Felix Flester as owners seeking preliminary and final major site plan approval with ancillary bulk variance and design waivers and exceptions to construct 9 warehouse buildings ranging in size from 85,600 square feet to 150,000 square feet, and equaling approximately 1,242,102 square feet in total. 5 full movement access drives along Randolph Road, parking for 706 vehicles and 142 trailer parking spaces, 234 loading spaces, and 5 monument-style site identification signs on premises known as Block 5, Lots 2 and 3, at the intersection of Randolph Road and Oak Glen Road. This application was originally scheduled to be heard on April 4th, 2019, when it was rescheduled to May 9th, 2019. After some testimony was placed on the record on May 9th, 2019, this application was carried to June 6, 2019, with no further notice. After some additional testimony on June 6, 2019, this application was carried to June 20th, 2019, with no further notice. And after some testimony on June 20th, 2019, this application was carried to Monday, July 29th, 2019, for a special meeting with no further notice. Counselor, just before you start, there's some people here in the audience who have been here before and may not understand our procedures. so I'll explain it to you. What we do is the applicant puts on a particular witness. In this case, the applicant has their traffic engineer here. After the traffic engineer is done with his testimony, the board has an opportunity to ask questions of the witness. After the board has asked questions, there's an opposition attorney that is representing a group. That individual then can ask questions of the traffic engineer. Once the attorney is done, then I will open it up to the public where you can ask as many questions as you want of this witness. And we do that for witness after witness. After the applicant is all done presenting their case, after the opposition attorney is all done presenting the case, I will then open it up to the public. At that point, you will be able to come up and speak and voice any concerns. You can make any statements that you have. But when I open it up tonight to the to questions to the traffic engineer, please, it's questions regarding traffic. Okay? With that, Counselor, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry, Counselor. The opposition attorney, would you please step forward? You want to just put your appearance on record?
Thank you, Chairman. Craig Bossong, B as in boy, O-S-S as in Sam, O-N-G, from Florio, Perucci, Steinhardt, and Capelli, representing the residents collectively known as Hope.
Okay.
Excuse me,
Counsel?
can I ask a question? Oh, did you want, go ahead, sorry.
This question is for Ms. Gonchar as well as Mr. Bossong. Do either of you have any issues with the board maintaining jurisdiction to conduct this hearing this evening?
I have no objection.
I have none either. But if I may ask counsel for the objector, if you could confirm whether there have been any changes to the list of individuals you're representing since this evening. I think you indicated that you're representing a group called Hope, and I would like some more information. We were given a list of individual names previously.
There's no change to that list that's previously submitted to the board.
Can you tell me who Hope is, what Hope is?
It's a collective of residents in the area that have banded together as a group and retained my services, my firm's services.
So are you saying that the entirety of Hope are the people you're representing?
Correct.
So there's nobody else who comprises that entity? It's just the individuals you represent?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. With that, Counselor, it's your case.
Thank you, and I did check about availability. I don't know when you want to address that, but
I'll discuss that with you at
Thank
the
you.
break.
Merrill Gonchar, oh, are we okay? Is this the only,
Can you wait 1 second until Paul comes back? Please, sorry.
this can be off, do we need another, off the record, I'm just asking technical, do we need another?
As long as your witness stays close to that microphone.
We're good. We don't
and
need any handheld.
We're okay.
Good.
But
We test it. Alina, is this okay?
We have a hand mic.
Either way.
I knew we had one before, but nobody ever suggests that I need to be amplified, but.
Oh, because they're wireless.
Thank you. Good evening, Merrill Gonchar. I'm a member of the firm of Sills, Cummis & Gross, and we continue our representation of the applicant Monmouth Commerce Center, LLC. You will recall when we were last before you, my traffic consultant was presenting testimony. We had completed the testimony of our engineer previously, our civil engineer, as well as our architect. Mr. Taylor had gotten through a portion of his testimony speaking about traffic volumes, and there had been some questions with regard to another application that had been granted approval. That's a church in the vicinity, and a request had been made that we look at that information and incorporate it. And so I will remind Mr. Taylor, unless somebody else would like to, he's still under oath.
Yes.
And can you tell us what you did subsequent to the last hearing, specifically with regard to the other application which the board raised and discussed with us?
Absolutely. At the last hearing, the approval of the Cornerstone Cavalry Church came up, and whether or not we had incorporated the volumes into our study. At the time when we were preparing the study, that had not been approved, and so we hadn't. But given the time between the last hearing and now, I had the ability to obtain the studies prepared by McDonough Ray Associates, as well as talk to the preparer of the study to make sure and to incorporate that into our analysis. We had the ability to prepare a subsequent traffic impact study supplement, which was submitted to the board and is dated July 17th, 2019, in which we summarize essentially the methodology and conclusions and findings of that study. Just to refresh the board, the approved church is 704 seats, and they will be having services on Sunday and also on Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. So based on the analysis that was prepared by the church's traffic expert, it was determined both in their studies and then with ours that there won't be any impact to the peak hour operation of our proposed project based on the church. We have very little trip generation on a Sunday when the church has their peak, when they're coming to and from. And the evening service will be after the peak street hour of the surrounding roadways. From that as well, there were improvements that were associated with that approval. And the church agreed to widen Lakewood Allenwood Road along their frontage to essentially work in concert with the improvements that we are proposing as part of our project. And what that allows us to do is at the intersection of Oak Glen and Lakewood Allenwood to construct not only the exclusive left and right turn lanes for Oak Glen, but also a right turn lane coming down Lakewood Allenwood Road into Oak Glen. What that does is actually allow us to eliminate an overcapacity movement that we had identified in our study. We were showing improvements from over the existing conditions that were there, but there was still a level of service F on the Oak Glen approach. With the proposed widening from the church and the construction of that right turn lane, we actually bring it down to a level of service D or better during all peak hours studied at this intersection. There was a comment letter issued by your board traffic engineer.
Can I just interrupt for 1 second?
You may.
Just for the record, I note that the board secretary has marked that supplemental 7/17/19 traffic study as Exhibit A24. Do we need to do anything further to put it in?
No,
Okay.
it's already marked.
Just so you know, it was A24 on your list of exhibits. Sorry, go ahead.
Not a problem. We did receive a review letter updated from your board's consultant dated July 26th, 2019, in which he reviews our supplemental analysis. He did ask for some additional information, being as the fact that we did not put any traffic associated with the church onto the roadway during those peak hours. Now, that was based on the testimony of the church's traffic engineer that there wasn't any activity during the peak hours. But even if those analyses or those volumes, if we were to look at the Institute of Transportation Engineers, you're looking at between 8 and 20 cars during that evening peak hour, right? So really no impact to the surrounding roadway network. But based on the report prepared specifically for the church, we didn't see that there were going to be any volumes on the adjacent roadways.
So the request that was made in the report from the board's traffic consultant was to take account of any traffic from the church that might be on the road during the road peak hour.
That's correct. ITE, if you were to put it into the land use for a general church, would show that there is small traffic associated with the AM and PM peak hours. But based on the testimony and the report preparation for this specific church, there really isn't going to be that type of volume.
Okay, and the ITE number, when you say 8 to 20 cars, that's over the course of a full hour?
That's correct. So in the morning, you would have 4 in and 3 out based on the ITE numbers. And in the evening, you would have 8 in and 13 out. Based on the distribution of the church's traffic study, about 50% of that would be traveling south, possibly turning either onto Oak Glen or down further. But those level of volume would not have any impact on the analysis that we have prepared.
Okay, would not change any levels or capacity evaluation because of the low volume?
That's correct.
Okay. You good? Okay. All right.
Counselor, Can I get some clarification? When we're talking about the traffic study as it relates to Allenwood, Lakewood Road, and Oak Glen, we're talking about automobiles or trucks? Because on the tapes that I listened, I thought I heard there mentioned that there would be no truck traffic going that route. All traffic would go to Lakewood, Farmingdale Road.
That is correct.
So it's just automobiles we're talking about?
Yep, so the supplemental analysis is from the church, which is all passenger vehicles at that point. And so the traffic associated with that would all be passenger vehicles. But the traffic associated with our proposal prohibits trucks from making right turns out of the driveways and requires them to all travel to 547 and then assumably up to Route 195.
Thank you.
And if that's based on the restriction.
That's based on this
Oh,
restriction.
so I
Yep.
just wanted to clarify, that's not just our direction to people coming to us, but is the reason for that because there are existing restrictions?
There are weight limit restrictions to the east up Lakewood Allenwood Road, but it will be prohibited through signage and through education of the tenants that come in, that all truck traffic is going to be limited to the west, to and from the west along Randolph Road.
Thank you.
Let me just, before we move on to our next, if there are any questions, that was really our testimony with regard to the church report and also with regard to your traffic consultant's supplemental report that we received. We're prepared to move on now to some of the access and other points unless there's questions on that issue.
No, let's complete his
Okay.
testimony.
All right. Okay. What we had not gotten to is, at the last hearing, if you can address the access to the site and then some of the internal circulation issues.
Absolutely. So currently, we all know that the site is vacant. So there are no real driveways accessing the site. There's some old growth along Lakewood Allenwood, but really there's no access to the site. We are proposing 5 driveways along Randolph Road, spaced anywhere between 350 and 575 feet apart. Now, when we get involved with the site engineer in a layout perspective, we look at a couple different things to figure out how many driveways, where the driveways will go, what the best location for things are. First and foremost, we look to the ordinance of the municipality we're working in, as well as the surrounding area along where the project is located. And to quote your ordinance, section 188-106A, it says, access to lots with more than 10 spaces. There shall be a maximum of 2 access drives to any street with their center lines spaced at least 56 feet apart, with no more than 2 lanes of traffic each, and with their center lines at least 30 feet from any property line. When the property along the street, when the property frontage along the street exceeds 500 feet in length, 1 access drive may be permitted for each 250 feet of frontage. So looking at that, we have 2,500 feet of frontage along Randolph Road. So based on that, there is the potential within the ordinance to construct 10 driveways through this area. Now, looking at the layout that we have, we felt 10 driveways was excessive. There was no need for that many driveways. But what we wanted to do is really look at the best way to promote internal circulation for the project and to safely navigate both passenger vehicles and the tractor trailers that we anticipate for the site. As I said, we also went and looked at other developments in the area. So there are other commercial and industrial developments along Randolph Road, including Arnold Steel across from us, which has approximately 715 feet of frontage and 3 driveways. 41 Randolph Road, which was recently approved, which has 609 feet of frontage and 2 driveways as approved. And the development on the corner of 547 and Randolph, which has 423 feet of frontage and 3 driveways. So what we felt was we are not really being out of character with what's currently developed along Randolph Road, and that the number of driveways that we were proposing would adequately made sense for the project. The other thing we looked at is some national information. Within the ITE's publication, Transportation and Land Development, I just want to quote it from their section of service and delivery areas. It says, the design should also ensure that site access and internal roadways can that the site access intersections and internal roadways can accommodate truck turning movements. Large activity centers should be designed with separate access for delivery trucks. The truck circulation system should be designed to discourage use by automobile traffic so that the internal truck circulation patterns will not interfere with automobile and pedestrian movements or with parking near the building. Based on that and the ITE guidance, we thought it best, as has been previously testified, to provide, again, separate truck and passenger vehicle entrances. And so within the frontage that we have and the layout that we have, it made sense to stagger every other, approximately, the truck driveways and the passenger vehicle driveways. This allowed us, again, to separate the driveways, but to direct traffic to and from them and to really keep the truck traffic separate from the employees coming to and from the site. Once we came up with how we were going to lay it out, we really dug a little further into the specific location of the driveways. As I stated, the driveways are relatively evenly spaced along the frontage, between 375 feet and 575 feet apart. Now, as I quoted earlier, the ordinance requires any driveway to be 30 feet from the property line. To the west of the property, we're about 130, 140 feet from our western property edge. And to the east, where the property corner takes a turn at Oak Glen Road, we're over 200 feet. So we thought that those 2 points, as it laid out, gave proper spacing from the adjacent street as well as from the neighboring property to the west.
You said 200 feet, so is 200 feet from that last passenger car entrance and exit from the site to the corner of Randolph and Oakland?
That's correct. It's just a little over 200 feet. As I stated, the ordinance says 30 feet. If this was a county road, Monmouth County allows driveways within 10 feet of a property line. And if it was an NJDOT road, they require 12 feet from the property line, but they would also require you to be at least 100 feet from any adjacent intersection. So the fact that we've been able to locate it over 200 feet would meet that criteria if it was under their jurisdiction. We also are dealing with existing developments in the area. So the western portion of our property is located opposite Arnold Steel. And that allowed us to locate the driveways essentially opposite their existing driveways. Now, our center truck driveway, or the westernmost truck driveway, falls about in the middle of the Arnold Steel, with the westernmost driveway being across from their western driveway, and our middle driveway for passenger vehicles being opposite their easternmost driveway. And from a traffic perspective, that's really where we line them up. We want to align them. We've already got points of conflict there, and we want to encourage vehicles to make those turning maneuvers at those existing intersections. The other thing we look at from a safety perspective for a driveway is ensuring that we provide sufficient sight distances for these driveways. Now, Randolph Road is relatively flat and relatively straight. There are some horizontal curves that run through there. But we were able to, based on the AASHTO Green Book, come up with, for tractor trailers, a sight distance requirement of 680 feet for turning maneuvers. And for passenger vehicles, 445 feet. And what we've done is ensure that each one of these driveways meets that criteria so that the vehicle waiting to turn out has adequate sight distance to look to the left, look to the right, ensure that the roadway's clear, and then pull out onto the driveway. So based on all that, we've located the driveways at good locations along the roadway. We've ensured that they'll be able to operate safely. And we have, while not, I won't say minimizing, but we have we've not utilized the entirety of what would be permitted under ordinance because we didn't feel that it was necessary. I've heard some concern at previous meetings with the number of driveways. And I think if we had come in here and put 10 driveways there, that would be excessive. But I think what gets lost in the site plan here is the length of frontage we're really talking about. I mean, along Randolph Road, you're talking about half a mile of frontage. Now, this could be divided up into 10 different conforming lots under the ordinance, and each one of those businesses would be entitled to a driveway. So we thought that locating them spaced out 300 to 500 feet, locating them opposite other existing driveways, provided the best design alternative that we could come up with for the property. There was also some questions about the layout and design of the driveways. Now, as you've heard me say, we will be taking the middle, so the westernmost driveway will be designated for passenger vehicles and trucks. And that'll allow circulation and access to the main circulation road around the perimeter of the site. The second driveway will be exclusively for trucks and access the loading docks. The middle driveway will be reserved for passenger vehicles. The next easternmost driveway will be for tractor trailers, and then the final driveway closest to Oak Glen will be for passenger vehicles. Each one of the driveways that have been designated for trucks have been designed to accommodate a WB67, or the 53-foot trailer, and the largest tractor trailer that you're going to have on the roadways today. They're designed with 50-foot inbound radii so that the vehicles can enter the site without crossing any lanes, without having to cross lanes on Randolph Road, without having to cross into incoming traffic within the site, to be able to maneuver safely to and from the site. And that, in order to ensure that, what we utilized was an AutoCAD-based program called vehicle tracking, which simulates those AASHTO design vehicles, that WB67, and allows us to really drive them through. Now, what we do as traffic engineers is we utilize that software because there's a bit of a factor of safety built into it. It's not the most aggressive driver. It's really, what we found in the transportation engineering world is that when you design it like that, you account for the variability in driver ability. By utilizing this software, we've built the factor of safety in so that we know that there won't be issues with vehicles coming to and from the site. There was also some questions of the board previously about queuing and analysis and how the interior stacking of the site is going to work. Each one of these driveways is provided approximately 100 feet of stacking before you get out to Randolph Road. Now that equates to...
Can you describe stacking, please?
Absolutely. So from the stop bar to the first interior aisle, we've provided at least 100 feet. So that is without any backing maneuvers, without any parking spaces, without any additional circulation aisles. It's a clear area for vehicles that are waiting to turn onto Randolph Road to sit, queue, look, and then ensure that there's a sufficient gap and a safe gap for them to exit the site. Now, one of the reasons we look at that is from a passenger vehicle perspective, 100 feet is 4 to 5 cars waiting. Now, we never anticipate that many vehicles waiting, but there could be at a shift change as people are coming out. A large tractor trailer, a 53-foot trailer, is about 73 feet long. And so what that'll do is also ensure that they're stacking for one tractor trailer at all times in each one of those driveways. And based on the volumes we've seen along Randolph Road, our 95th percentile queues are less than that. We're saying during the busiest hour, you might have about 1 car queued up there as the turnover continues to go. So we feel that the design of that 100 feet will be more than sufficient to handle any type of queues that could be assumed and calculated for the project.
Right. Let me just ask for clarification. So the way you make that judgment is you look at the volume running along the road during the busiest anticipated hour of traffic?
That's correct. We look at the peak commuting hour of the roadway, and then we surcharge on the peak hours of the project and utilize them to perform our capacity analyses.
And the capacity is meaning how long, based on the number of vehicles anticipated to be leaving the site during that peak hour, how long a truck or a vehicle would have to wait to have a gap in the flow of traffic large enough for them to safely leave based on the site distances and other criteria you discussed?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
I guess to piggyback on that a little bit too, one thing we do, given the nature of what we're proposing, is we make sure that we incorporate the heavy vehicle percentages or the truck traffic that we anticipate for the site. So at each one of the truck driveways, we utilize 100% trucks. And the formulaic calculation that's within the highway capacity manual takes into account the startup time and how long it takes a tractor trailer to identify it, to get going, and to exit the site, and the type of gap that's necessary for them to be able to do it.
Excuse me, Counselor. Mr. Taylor, I'm referring to the exhibit that's displayed on the screen right now, all right? And as you can see, that utilizing the vehicle turning, the vehicle tracking, you can see that the larger wheelbase vehicles are encroaching into the opposite direction of travel. You want to comment on the appropriateness of that?
It took me a minute to figure out what you were pulling up there. I was getting dizzy watching me. Can you identify what's up there and then advise um, whether that's consistent with what you've testified to this evening.
So, looking at the screen, this appears to be, since can't see the bottom right corner, but the truck circulation plan that was submitted as part of the application package.
Sheet 90.
Thank you. Subsequent to that, we had a review by your board engineer. And we had, through Mr. Catani's testimony, the acknowledgement that the radii and driveways would be relooked at and that they would be modified to accommodate the tractor trailers. Now, I do have, if you want to introduce it,
Should we distribute them?
yep,
You have copies?
I have copies. An updated plan entitled Driveway Vehicle Circulation Exhibit, prepared by Dynamic Engineering and dated 6/20/19.
Has that been submitted?
It was submitted along on the flash drive last meeting.
With all due respect, the answer is no. This was not formally submitted for review by the
No, it
board's
was not.
professionals.
It was intended to be an exhibit at the last hearing.
Right.
If questions came up to it. We've made the affirmation that we are going to modify the radii, but I think it's pertinent to the board, the chairman's concern that we can accommodate it. We had the same concern that your professionals did, and we took a harder look in between the hearings. And, I mean,
Is this, as an exhibit, this would be A25?
Yes.
Do we have that electronically that it can be displayed?
I believe it was on the last flash drive I did it last. I think it's this one.
Mr. Taylor, make sure Mr. Boston gets a copy of that.
Here, do you have any extra copies? Oh, he's passing.
Paul, you want to take one and pass it down?
Any good?
The western driveway is now like 100 feet wide. You see it?
Bill, listen. They're all the same.
Were there enough copies for the board? Will all of you get copies?
It's still making.
Oh, they're coming. Sorry. I know, I could see that.
Like this?
Just, you know, the project was approved, but we did it this way. Is that extra?
Ms. Newman, have you had an opportunity to review this?
No, Mr. Chairman, as was indicated, while it may have been put on the disc as a reference, as if it was testified to, it wasn't submitted for formal review. I would note, just if you look at the West Randolph Road, and I'm trying to get it up on the screen, but I'm having some issues, you know, I would certainly defer to Jim, but it looks like that just got about 100 feet wide.
Is that over what they allow? Is that the right of the width? You want me to? Is that Steve?
So this is telling you how a tractor trailer is going to come in. Yeah, right. I mean, Mr. Taylor, if you look at this, I think you have to agree that a couple of the driveways still have issues, all right? I mean, look at, West Randolph Road, entrance B, okay?
Yes.
In that one, what appears to be the outbound vehicle clearly tracks over into the inbound, into the ingress. These driveways have become exceptionally wide, and do they agree with our ordinance? Do they meet our ordinance?
I think your ordinance grants flexibility when it comes to the design of, and the necessity for the uses that are proposed.
Well, let me ask my engineer.
Mr. Chair, the ordinance allows a 24-foot wide driveway. Anything wider than that has to be approved by the planning board. So
Okay.
it does allow a wider driveway, but it gives you the authority to approve it.
It's at it's board's discretion.
Yeah. Specifically says.
That's correct.
Can you provide, I'm sorry, could you provide us what the widths of these driveways are?
And while he's looking at that, I'll just say, just looking at this now, again, we haven't had a chance to review it and seeing it for the first time, but a lot of these movements are, there's little or no room for error, or you're over a curb line. The one you were pointing out, entrance A, there's an excessive, erroneous area of striping that's required just to make the right turn in. Which one is it? Exit D, I mean, the truck is nearly over the curb line, whereas a street light right next to it. Exiting, they're almost crossing the far edge of pavement. So there's definitely room for error, or no room for error, I should say.
But isn't that already built in?
If I may, for me to get some information from this diagram, or all of the diagrams, I'd need some hard numbers on what I'm looking at, the widths.
Well,
That's what
They're not all-
that's what he's getting for you.
Secondly, also, you see, you have 5 driveways, and yet everything's indicative. You have one for trucks, one for cars, all well and good. So what happens when they all come in? You have a truck coming in, a car coming in, the different vehicles coming in. What happens to the interior of this project?
We're going to get to that. We've just discussed the access drives. We're going to get to the interior.
So the driveways are approximately 40 feet wide in order to accommodate the tractor trailers.
Where's that? Is that at the throat or at the curb line?
That's at the throat. The curb
What-
line opening is,
And entrance A, 40 feet?
no, entrance A, because of the striping and the attempt to align it opposite the anchor driveway is wider than that. At its widest, at the radius, it provides approximately 100 to 110-foot curb line opening and a width of approximately 60 feet. And that could be rectified. We have the ability to pull that driveway further west and separate its alignment with the anchor driveway. But we thought a better design alternative to curve the driveway through there and align it opposite of the the existing anchor driveway. What this exhibit was really designed to illustrate was, like I said, the affirmation of Mr. Catani that the driveways could and would be modified should the application be approved to accommodate the truck traffic associated with them.
If the board grants you the relief for the width of the driveways.
That's correct.
I'm hearing from the board some major disappointment and discontent with these driveways, all right? These are not the nice, neat driveways that we saw on the aerial. I think the applicant has to go back and look at these driveways and make them work more realistically with what our ordinance permits. Mr. Nacastro?
In your analysis, was the level of service for these driveways done on the highest peak traffic on cars and trucks?
Yes.
Can you share that?
We had levels of service C on the driveways.
Did you submit that analysis?
Um,
it's not in the traffic study.
It's
then.
not in the most recent traffic study, not the supplement. I thought it was in the most revised,
No, it's not.
the April 26th.
Exhibit A7 only has the 5 off-site intersections. It does not go into any of the driveway analyses.
My apologies then. It's something we can submit to the board.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, Mr. Seaman?
On specifically entrance A on West Randolph and entrance B, it looks like the intention is for the inbound truck to be crossing over the striped portion. And everything seems to bottleneck at one point or another. I mean, what is, and listen, I know it's not going to be an everyday occurrence, but what is the separation if there's 2 trucks traveling inbound, outbound at the same time? I mean, this is like, there's no margin of error at that point, from what it appears.
Well, actually, Mr. Seaman, there is no margin of error because on entrance B, the outbound tractor-trailer is actually halfway into the incoming lane. So this clearly has to be reworked.
Mr. Chairman, is there a way for the, let me not forget that. Let me ask the applicant. Is there a way that when you redo these studies, is there a way to graphically show the truck queued in one side or the other so that, because right now with the dashed lines, I think you gotta be an engineer to really understand it. Be nice if it was more user-friendly, please.
What we can do is we can overlay the inbound and the outbound turning maneuvers together to show that they work together.
Gotcha.
Absolutely.
With a reconfigured driveway that meets the ordinance. And,
If I can just ask a question, as I understood it, it doesn't, I didn't understand your engineer to indicate that it was a waiver situation, but rather that there's 24 except if the board allows wider. That
Yeah.
didn't sound to me.
Yeah, I can read it. You want me to read it? So it's,
Thanks.
driveways with widths exceeding 24 feet shall be approved by the planning board, giving consideration to the width, curbing, traffic flow, radii of curves, and traffic lane divider.
So it does seem at least to contemplate larger than 24, provided that information is provided and the board grants it, but I
well,
don't think it's
your
phrased as a
request-
waiver.
You're requesting a waiver.
I don't think that that's how it's written, but we can pursue that further.
At the very least, it's a request that you're making of the board.
Right, it contemplates that the board has to approve it.
You're going to have to request relief. I'm sorry, I cut you off your testimony, but Deputy Mayor is very interested in the internal circulation and discussion of that. So, can we go into that?
Surely. So based on the layout of the 5 driveways, and as we've contemplated, once we get interior of the site,
You want to go back?
yeah, Laura, could you
Can we go back to
bring up the site plan?
the overall?
And let's be very clear, when you resubmit this new driveway configuration, let's make sure that the engineer gets it in plenty of time, both the engineer, well, all of our professionals get it in plenty of time so that we can have it reviewed
Absolutely.
prior to the meeting.
Perfect, thank you. So we've had discussion about the 5 driveways. If you go to the westernmost driveway, as you enter, as I said, that's contemplated for both tractor trailers and passenger vehicles. It allows the tractor trailers to access the main circulation aisle both through the middle of the site and to the southern portion of the site. It also provides access to the parking fields for buildings A and F. We are providing parking along the face of those buildings to the front access portion of it, which would be the front of house and where the employees and visitors would park. If we travel east to the next driveway, that provides access to the loading docks for both buildings A and F, as well as buildings B and G. There are loading bays, which meet the ordinance of 60 feet, up against both faces of the building, with trailer parking in the interior of the site. These are anticipated to be utilized simply for trailers, and that the vehicles accessing the various loading docks would back into those loading spaces. We do provide 130 feet from the face of the door to the edge of the parking space to ensure that even with trailers parked there, that the active loading and unloading could be accommodated safely. As you travel east to the middle driveway, that driveway feeds the automobile parking for buildings B, C, G, and H. And there will be doors, depending on the tenants and how it lays out, there will be access doors along all of those buildings. And it's anticipated that the employees and any visitors for those tenants would access via that aisle. Heading west, we have a similar layout of loading bays and tractor-trailer maneuver area without the trailer parking in this section. And it will be the loading bays for buildings C, H, D, and I. And the final easternmost driveway will provide access for passenger vehicles to buildings D, E, and I. And this has been designed in accordance with the ITE suggestions and recommendations of separating the passenger vehicle with the tractor-trailer loading and unloading operation. It allows us to bring the passenger vehicles in via the three driveways. And we really anticipate the utilization by tractor-trailers of the westernmost driveway to be at a minimum, since it doesn't directly access the loading docks. But we did want to provide the flexibility of people being able to come in there from tractor-trailer standpoint. But it really, like I said, allows us to separate it and keep the two operations, which are different, but necessary to keep them separate.
So am I to understand that your testimony is that these driveways are going to be implemented in such a way that the interior traffic is never going to be an issue with each other? They won't have a tractor-trailer on a loading dock, and then there's someone coming in to visit, and there's an issue with a car, and then the tractor-trailer. I guess I just, I don't have a lot of faith that people will be able to come into one driveway, access only what they need, and they won't be, meandering about.
I mean, part of that goes, and I guess I'll hit it on a little bit later in the testimony, is the signage that's being requested for the site. Now, part of this is adequate signage for vehicles and people coming to and from the site to identify which building they're going to, which section of this development they would be accessing. The vast majority of the tractor trailers are going to be professional, well, they'll all be professional drivers, but repeat people to and from their individual buildings. The other part is the employees who are coming to and from. Most of the traffic that's generated by a warehouse development is employees. You don't have a lot of visitors. Not to say that there's none, but most of the people will know where they're going to and from the site. So I don't think that interior to the site you're going to have traffic issues. I think that the roadways have been lined out with sufficient width, and the interior intersections have been designed with sufficient sight lines that it'll operate safely. And I think that was a bit of concern when we were laying it out, was to make sure. That's why we have perpendicular roadways and a good grid network laid out through the site to allow this to happen, to allow it to function like a roadway street network.
And we know that now because you now know who the tenants are?
No, I know that just based on the layout.
Please, let's not do this.
I know that based on the layout of the site, knowing the fact that there's going to, inherently in a warehouse use, there's interaction between passenger vehicles and tractor trailers, with a higher percentage of tractor trailers coming to and from the site. And based on design practice, we've come up with, and then the other ones that I've developed over the years, that separation, but also these interior intersections, to allow both types of vehicles to safely navigate through the site. So it's not really a question of tenancy, it's a question of warehouse design.
But you can't subdivide these warehouses to 5,000 square foot,
I believe the ordinance allows that. I believe there was testimony that we would not be going that low, but I don't.
was
I
that?
think our testimony was that it was not our goal. Your ordinance allows it.
It allows it.
That's correct.
True.
Your ordinance allows it.
But we also have to
that-
make assumptions on what's allowed. You didn't testify that you would not do it, you testified that that was not your goal. And I don't want to mince words, counsel, but
Yes.
there's that possibility. So the testimony should be based on that testimony, should be based on that possibility, in
Why
all
don't-
fairness.
Why don't we ask if the size of the space would that affect your testimony in terms of the adequacy of the layout and the ability of both trucks and passenger vehicles to safely maneuver through the site?
No, it would not.
How about the usage? The use of the
Warehouse?
space? Well, again, you don't know what type of warehouse it may be. What happens if it's a warehouse with 5,000 square feet that someone is just doing furniture, for example, and people do come to that site to see what type of furniture there is? That is a possibility under that ordinance, under the SED ordinance, that could be a possible use.
I think the trip generation and the guidance given by the Institute of Transportation Engineers, when we don't know the tenancy, is to use the procedure that we did, utilize Land Use Code 150, because it does encompass both lower and higher generators of warehouses within the data.
Well, Peter, does the ordinance, or does the SED zone permit retail sale in a warehouse?
Laura, can I see the, I believe it may, but it's limited.
Find out right now.
You didn't say
And when you're looking at that, Ms. Newman, can I ask you, do we have an ordinance, do we have a minimum throat distance?
A minimum throat
Yeah, I
distance on
thought
a
we had
drive?
125 for a throat distance, for
I'll confirm, I think it's 150.
150?
I'll confirm that.
Okay.
why didn't their traffic guy?
So, yeah, the answer to that question is yes regarding retail. Retail use shall be permitted as an accessory use to a permitted warehousing distribution facility, provided the percent floor area devoted to retail use shall be limited to 1,000 square feet or 5% of the gross floor area, whichever is less.
So you're absolutely
Yes.
correct. Yes.
part of the ordinance, so I think I am correct.
Okay. So there is a possibility here that we will have retail sale of the warehouse merchandise.
And I think those numbers are incorporated in the overall development of and utilization of Land Use Code 150. I think that if we're doing hypotheticals here, you go the absolute opposite direction too. And we go with a high cube warehouse who has 500,000 square feet and 10 employees. That's why, without knowing the tenancy, we're guided to utilize this Land Use Code 150, so it encompasses both sides of it.
Yes, but as Mr. Nacastro pointed out, we have to go by what the ordinance permits, all right? Because the applicant could get approval and turn around and sell the approval to another firm, another developer, who then says, I want to put in all 5,000 square foot units.
So let me ask the question again. Was it your testimony a few moments ago that regardless of whether the tenancies were the 5,000 that are permitted, minimum, that are permitted by ordinance, or whether they were all larger, or whether there was a mix, would your testimony as to the adequacy and safety of the layout internal to the site be different?
No, it would not change.
So let me ask you a question, all right? First of all, what ITE trip generation code did you use?
We used 150, which is warehousing.
And what did you base upon? Just total square foot of the warehouse?
That's correct.
And you used the version 10, correct?
That's correct.
You want to continue on?
Mr. Chairman, just so we could, I went through this quickly. I think where we have the offsetting section is under streets. So I'm not sure that these are defined as streets since they're access points. So I don't see where we have a separation requirement between access drives.
Okay, it wasn't so much about the separation requirement, but the throat length.
We don't have a section that
We
deals with
don't
that.
have an ordinance for that.
That's correct.
Okay. Right, well, I'm going to start questioning that. Questions here.
We're just pulling up ordinance sections. Who's saying it?
This is ingress and egress.
You mean you have a hard copy of one? Not enough phone? I'm apparently the only person who still actually has a hard copy of an ordinance. Why don't you ask them if that's different than what they're looking for? What's the section?
It's section 106, or 188, 106, F, in the ordinance, which refers to ingress and egress driveways. Under A, it says, "All main driveways into commercial and/or industrial areas shall be a minimum of 30 feet wide, or as controlled by outside agencies. On industrial or commercial applications, a 30-foot wide circulation aisle must be maintained for emergency purposes."
But if you
Sorry,
can't
too
keep up.
far.
Sorry.
Way too fast. On industrial applications to,
A 30-foot wide circulation aisle must be maintained for emergency purposes.
Isn't that in the,
So based on the reading of that, we're required a minimum of 30 feet wide driveway for our commercial and industrial development with no maximum. I don't know if I'm reading it differently.
I think I'm reading it differently, that you're allowed up to a maximum of 30 feet.
Let me reread it then. All main driveways into commercial and/or industrial areas shall be a minimum of 30 feet wide, a minimum of 30 feet wide, or as controlled by outside agencies.
What's the
Well, there's
number?
two sections of the code that kind of somewhat conflict with each other, but if they're overlapping, for this application, it's a minimum of 30 feet wide, and if you go back to the other code section, if anything over that would need board approval.
The specific generally overrules, so I don't know if, without looking at the other section, if that's not.
Well, it's A. So
A and F, the
But
same,
one is
same,
specific to commercial and industrial.
So is
The
A.
other one, that's what I'm asking. if
So
there's
A
one.
is talking about commercial driveways. Driveways with widths exceeding 24 feet shall be approved by the planning board, giving consideration to width, curbing, traffic flow, radii of curves, and traffic lane divider. And I think
and then
part of
F
what,
kind of gives the board more guidance that for commercial or industrial facility should have a minimum of 30.
So so what you're saying is that F
sets-
gives some relief of 6 more feet
Yes.
from the 24.
I would
Well, it
interpret
actually
it that
says
way.
minimum of 30.
all right, so you can go to 40 or 50.
That's what it says. If it says minimum of 30, it would seem that more is permitted if that's the minimum, not the maximum. One says all main
Our
driveways.
professionals are going to have to weigh in on this at some point.
I think it still goes back to the first point, which is we have multiple driveways. We don't have a level of service associated with the driveways. We have some which allow vehicular movement or passenger vehicle only, some only allow truck movement only, and I think that that all has to be categorized and looked at as one. We're not used to seeing an application that is this much frontage where someone wants 5 different access points. In addition, as you look at what I guess is entrance E, so I'll kind of pull that one up. I mean, these are the things that we need to look at. This truck's coming in to a traffic island, just as was indicated by Mr. Winkowski earlier. So I think we have to weight it all and look at them all. I'm not saying that 30 feet or maybe more than 30 feet is adequate, but when we're looking at 5 different site access points, there should be justification among each of those, as well as the corresponding level of service.
Understood. But what I'm concerned about is that the applicant is representing that we can go 50, 60, 70 feet.
And I'm
There's
saying,
no
Mr. Chairman, that
control.
doesn't make sense to me. A 70-foot wide access drive when you have 4 other points makes no sense.
I
They'd
concur
have
with
to
you.
support that by the truck movement getting into the site. So I don't think that that section entitles them to a 70-foot wide access drive, or 50 for that point. But they'd have to lay it out, not on an exhibit, on a plan that's submitted for us to look at and review for what, from an engineering sense, makes the most sense.
I concur with our engineer, and does anybody on the board have a difference of opinion? I think the board is in agreement that these driveways have to be cut down in width. At least at the PCs of the radii, where they touch the curb along Randolph Road.
Maybe I can just get a point of clarification then. When I read this, and usually as a traffic engineer, when we apply a width, we're not talking about the curb line opening, we're talking about the physical width of the driveway. It's my understanding in the reading of this that it's a 30-foot minimum for the width of the driveway, not the opening of the street.
Justin, I've been here a really long time, and I can go through every single application that this board had, and we've never had a radii that's exceeded 30 feet. In fairness, a truck can get in on 30 feet. What we ask for applicants to demonstrate is the vehicle movements coming in and coming out of a site so that we can review if in fact there's conflicts.
So you're saying a radius of 30 feet and a width of,
No, the width is 30 feet
at the driveway,
at
the
the
curb line opening?
entrance.
I have a hard time understanding that. If we have a 24-foot wide driveway, that means they're 3-foot radii as they come in and out to have a 30-foot.
At the throat. The throat is 30 feet.
Right?
Throat, the width is usually measured at the throat.
Thank you. So the curb line
After the
opening
radius.
would need to be,
Wider.
okay. Thank you. That's a clarification I needed when we're looking at this.
Counselor, I'd just like to ask Mr. Taylor a couple more questions about the interior circulation. When your site engineer was up here, he deferred to Mr. Taylor. I am concerned about the maneuvering of, can we zoom on one of the entrances that is a truck entrance? So I'm concerned about a truck coming in and maneuvering into one of those first bays. We're talking about here at least WB67s. So it's not like a car that can get parked easily. It's going to be a couple of maneuvers to get in. Now, I understand clearly that you have 135 from the loading dock to the trailer parking on the other side of the aisle, right? But what happens to inbound traffic that wants to go further into one of the docks on that building or to the building to the south of it while that truck is making those maneuvers to get into that bay?
So there's 2 questions in there, and let's take it apart a little bit. The vehicle entering there to access that loading dock is going to pull forward and then in one maneuver back into that loading bay. It's not multiple maneuvers, that's why we give it the depth that it is. for WB 67 to get into that loading bay. If there is now a vehicle making that maneuver, the access aisle that's located at the northern end of the trailer parking is available for him to come in, make that left-hand turn, circulate around the area, and come back to the loading dock that he needs to access. We've given him multiple points once they come interior to the site to be able to access those loading docks.
Have you ever observed the operation of the truck maneuvering at one of the turnpike rest areas? Okay? I will tell you that there's no way in hell that a driver is going to do all that excess maneuvers because it's too difficult for him. There's no incentive for him. He will sit there in your ingress drive waiting for that truck to pull into that spot. He's not going to do all these other maneuvers that you're saying. And you watch what goes on at the rest areas, all right? And you will see that the truckers sit there while a truck makes all their maneuvers to get into a spot. So, yes, theoretically, what you're saying could occur, and I'm telling you realistically, it's not going to. And one of the concerns that this board has is that the trucks are going to queue back onto Randolph Road.
I understand your comment, Mr. Chair. And I just have to, with all due respect, disagree. I've designed millions of square feet of warehousing. When you're talking about a large-scale warehousing development such as this, by providing the multiple escape routes for these vehicles, the guy's not going to sit there because the odds are that he's going to that very next dock are slim. He's possibly accessing either one of the buildings on either side. He's accessing one of the docks down at the other end. And knowing that, he's going to take that relief valve and utilize the other access aisles throughout the site. It's a common design that we utilize in the industry in order to allow that circulation. The last thing we want from a perspective is the same thing that you have concerns with. We want to allow the operators safe, efficient access to the site. We want to give them the ability to circulate throughout the site. Because if it's difficult for them to get in and out, the tenants aren't going to come. They're not going to stay. That's why we've designed, one, separated as they are, two, the multiple driveways that are being proposed to allow multiple access points so we don't have the likelihood of those conflicts happening. And even when they do, then they have the ability to circulate in other directions.
Is there any criteria in ITE about having the circulation aisles aligned for warehousing development, aligned with the entrances?
I'm not 100% sure I understand the question.
I'm asking you in ITE if there's any published guidelines that say that the drive aisles should be aligned with the entrance drives for a warehouse.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. If this was a shopping center, a large mall, if you will, okay? What's the current state of practice on that? You come in from the street and you go into a circulation aisle, which then you have the option to disperse into the aisles to park, correct?
You're talking about coming into a shopping center, and I mean, we lay out shopping centers in multiple different ways. I'm still not 100% sure what you're asking.
I'm asking if if this was not a warehouse development, but it was a shopping center, a regional mall, if you will, all right, not a strip mall. Would you have incoming cars aligning themselves with the aisles? Or would you have one or two entrance from the roadway onto a circulation aisle, which allowed a car to loop around and decide what aisle they wanted to go down?
Depending on the size of a shopping center, I would say we would most likely have multiple access points feeding different areas of the shopping center, with separate truck entrance and exits to separate the passenger vehicle and the truck traffic.
Right, okay. But you would have a circulation road.
Not necessarily. It really all depends on the layout of the site.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about, all right? I mean, I've done plenty of these shopping centers, and I've done warehouse also, and I've always had where trucks and passenger cars come in and hit a circulation road, interior in the site, and then disperse from there. And the reason why that's done is because it limits the number of access points onto the local road. And this is something that we've brought up several times before, that there are several members on this board who have an issue with the number of access drives. And we've presented this to you, the concept, we've asked you to look at an internal circulation road. You provide it on the west side, so you must acknowledge there's a need for it. And then that would take care of the problems, all right? And then we could reduce the number of access drives.
I don't know if that really solves whatever perceived issue that you may have. I think that the number of access points and the separation of them and the layout of the site allows for the circulation throughout. I think that the design of the driveways are in full conformance with the ordinance requirements and even half of what's permitted on a property this large. And I think once you consolidate those driveways, you start having the possibility of internal circulation issues, right? So now we're talking about bringing an access aisle directly in along the face of these buildings. You're asking vehicles to possibly make 180-degree turns off of the roadway and instituting confusion at that point. So as designed, I believe it's a better design alternative to keep the driveways where they are and provide the 5 that are necessary with the layout of the buildings to separate the truck traffic and the passenger vehicles.
Anybody else want to weigh in on this?
I mean, you know, my initial recommendation was to limit the amount of excess, ingress and egress. So I know early on, my concern was limiting the amount of driveways out onto the street. However, based upon your testimony and your explanation earlier today, I'm somewhat confident in with the amount of driveways now. I understand what he's saying, that the reduction of the driveways could potentially create more of an issue. I get it. So I'm still up in the air. I think I would rather see a circulation pattern, like you said, than to come back with some kind of video that shows it.
Does anyone else want to?
Mr. Chairman, and I think speaking specifically of the entrance second from the west, so your first main truck-only access point, right?
Yes.
So you said the length of a WB67 is actually 73 feet in total length?
That's correct.
Correct. So what is the length of those stalls on the eastern face of the westernmost building?
Eastern face of the west.
Does that make sense?
Yep. So they are 60 feet long as required by your ordinance for a loading zone.
So then theoretically, you would have the potential for 13 feet of a truck sticking out into the drive aisle if it was backed up to the front face of the loading dock.
Yes, and that's designed as per standard warehouse layout. That's why we give the 130 feet face. So what you actually have is a 60-foot drive aisle. If the tractor trailer is there with the tractor attached, you still have a 60-foot drive aisle between the face of the tractor and the possible storage, the possible parking of the trailer on the other side.
But all standards aside, just from a practical standpoint, any vehicle traversing that lane would have to adjust around that car, the truck parked there.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, and that's typical of a warehouse design.
Anyone else want to weigh in on the access drives, the circulation?
Well, I think there's merit to a circulation drive. If I look at any of the stores that we have within Howell Township, you pull into a mall or several storefronts, you're not pulling in off of a road right to a drive aisle, where you're going to park. The only thing I could see there is a lot of accidents by people getting hit in the rear. You can't pull in, and if you have 2 or 3 cars in front of you because they don't know where to park, because it's a big decision once you pull in off that main road, because the only place to go is to the parking space. So it just doesn't make any sense to me not to consider a circulation area. But, by example, before you said something about if the truck came in and there was another car trying to leave, then the truck would have to do other maneuvers. What is that? What would that be, other maneuvers?
So that was in reference, I think, to the chair's question. If there was a vehicle or if there was a tractor trailer pulling into that first loading dock, the other maneuvers would be a left-hand turn, and then it would travel down, if we're talking about the second driveway from the west, right? If there was a vehicle on the easternmost side of the westernmost building, and they were making a maneuver into the loading dock, the entering vehicle would then turn left and travel down the eastern side of the trailer's parking spaces. Again, a 60-foot wide aisle width through that area to then navigate back to whichever loading dock it was destined for.
So he's going to turn left, go through the pattern of drive to come back to the space that he originally wanted.
That's correct. Or he was maybe not going to those spaces at all. He could have been destined for a point further down that aisle on either side of the roadway. Because this driveway provides access to 4 buildings worth of loading docks, they're going to be traversing to each one of these. So he may want to make that left-hand turn, and then he does it. Or he may want to be 2/3 of the way down that building, and it's just as easy for him to back into his loading space, traveling north through the access aisle or traveling south through the access aisle. So he would circulate around to the point where he needs to be able to back his vehicle into.
There's a lot of suppositions. I will give you that. I still think a circulation plan for the interior of a project of this size makes perfect sense. Because of the size of the project, I think we should be looking for all of the possibilities that could occur. And I think that the size may make other issues come that we haven't even thought of, because this is the first time we're dealing with something of this substantial size.
I understand your concern, I do. The reason we design it the way we do, whether it's a 30,000 square foot warehouse building, an 80,000, 100,000, each one of these buildings is, 140,000 approximately.
Could I just weigh in? Does any of these driveways somewhat work? I mean, E and F don't look to be too bad, but C and D just look like a queuing problem could result. And maybe a possible tiebreaker here would be limit, as they come into the driveway, they can't continue straight. They can exit from that western drive aisle, but they can't enter. They have to actually make that left-hand turn, go east, go down and around, and go all the way around to come back up the other side. And that may even be better for the tractor-trailer driver, because then he'd be pulling into the spot, being able to look out his driver's window and see the maneuver into the loading dock. And then it would allow extra queuing interior. Well, I just know that.
Truck to stop here. Right, that's what I'm saying. Because he'd have to go. Right, but what I'm saying is this gives you straight through if there's nobody there. What they're forcing is that you have to stop in the throat and make a left or right, so you're actually increasing stacking, aren't you? The potential for it.
Yes.
We'd point that one of the downsides. It's maybe doable, but.
So in looking at this, I understand the point. From a design perspective, I don't see the necessity. We were looking at possibly moving it to align with the middle of that aisle on driveway, what are we calling it? Driveway C. To access. But what that does then is require a decision point as you come in, which could lead to the potential or further potential of conflict as the vehicles are turning left or right, because now you're beholden to other vehicles as they turn. By providing this straight through movement, it allows the right-of-way coming in with the relief valve being that east-west access aisle between the buildings.
Only if there are not trucks already making a movement into the spots closest to that entrance.
Correct. Well, if they're closest to that entrance, then they would make that left-hand turn and use the east-west access aisle.
And then they'd be
The reason
blindly
we-
coming into that spot, not coming in.
The reason we want to maintain inbound access in that point is because the tractor trailer backs into the loading dock. If you force him around that loop, he's now facing past that into the throat to make the maneuver to get back into the loading dock. We want him interior to the site and backing into that space so as to not impact the circulation.
The entrance.
I didn't say that the building's not too close to the road, but, or as you've depicted, those first spots are the garbage compactor.
Yes, there is a garbage compactor and then 2 spaces, correct.
But that would create a better movement, and it would make the truck driver easier to pull into the spot.
I don't believe it changes the ease of that maneuver. I really don't. I think that allowing them to pull forward and pull through gives them an easier maneuver because it allows that circulation aisle to remain open for vehicles entering.
It sounds like you're gonna do an interior circulation plan, so I guess those maneuvers can be shown and proven. Okay.
With all that, I think the one thing that would be most helpful, at least for my clarity, is I know you've done a lot of different analysis in terms of peak time and all those. What are we looking at really in terms of worst case scenario? How many trucks could be theoretically entering at any given moment? I mean, I know instant moments are kind of, but if we're thinking worst case scenario, we're like, oh, there's a small fleet of trucks entering here at once. You know, but what do the actual numbers look like there?
That's actually a great point, thank you. When we get to the full build-out of Phase 4, during the peak hours, assuming 20% heavy vehicles, which is standard procedure, we would be looking at 35 trucks, or a total of 27 in and 8 out during the morning peak hour.
I'm sorry, give those numbers again, 35 trucks?
35 total, 27 in and 8 out. And in the evening peak hour, you're looking at a total of 36 trucks, 10 in and 26 out.
Now, those are peak hour vehicles.
Those are peak hour
Now, what
vehicles.
about the generator peak?
So the generator peak, as we discussed the last time, actually is a lower number for the AM, and the PM increased by approximately 23 vehicles, I think. So 20% of that would be an additional 4 trucks.
And how many parking trucks are you proposing? How many spots for,
We have 243, I believe, loading docks.
243 spots, and you're projecting 35 trucks in and out during peak hours?
That's correct.
And that's not, you don't see any inconsistency with that, with those numbers?
I do not, no, not from a
No?
transportation.
With
engineering.
243 spots?
That's correct.
Let me just ask, those are not your numbers, those are numbers based on,
Those are Institute of Transportation Engineers numbers.
Is Mr. Taylor done with his testimony yet?
with safety.
Do you have the same numbers for cars too as well? I
Yes,
know those
absolutely.
were trucks.
Yep.
Can you direct them also to the page? That might be helpful.
Yes, absolutely. It's on page 10 of A7, and it's table 4, trip generation, which breaks it down by the various phases of the development. But going to the full build-out of the project, in that same morning peak hour, you would have a total of 139 trips, which is 107 in and 32 out. And in the evening peak hour, you're talking about 141 trips with 38 vehicles, passenger vehicles in, and 103 out.
And what was the total number of parking spots for cars?
706, I believe.
I believe it's 704.
706, yes. I guess we can actually go into that, Merrill. we haven't really touched on the parking.
Yep,
I'll come back this evening.
okay.
So that leads us into the parking requirements for this site. Now, you've heard previous testimony from Mr. Catani about the number of spaces that are being provided. From my perspective, typically, we would look at a warehouse parking generation as the office being ancillary to that warehouse, which would generate a much lower demand for the project if we use the ordinance requirement of 1 per 5,000 square feet for the entire development. But in order to make sure that it would be sufficiently parked, we generated for the office independently at a rate of 1 parking space per 300 square feet. So with the 145,000 square feet of office, that generates a requirement of 484 parking spaces. And the remainder, 1,097,102 square feet for the warehouse, would be 220 spaces for a total requirement of 704, where we are providing 706. So we feel that we are adequately parked, and in my professional opinion, probably overparked for this, given the fact that most of that office space is going to be ancillary, or all the office space is ancillary to the warehouse use. But we wanted to make sure, if it was broken out, that we were sufficiently parked and wouldn't require a parking variance for the project. From a loading perspective, we meet the loading requirements of the ordinance. Mr. Catani touched on this. I don't think I really need to belabor the point. There was some discussion, which I think we put to rest, in the fact that the trailer parking stalls, which are 55 feet in length, are not they're not loading spaces. Every loading space that's along the face of the buildings are designed in full conformance with the ordinance at 60 feet. These trailer parking spaces for maximum trailer size of 53 feet are 55 in depth and will adequately accommodate those tractor trailers.
And can you just clarify what it is we're anticipating to be in those spaces? These are not storage for, these are going to be on wheels,
That's correct.
the truck without the cab?
Yes, we are not anticipating, we're not proposing to put containers and store containers out here. These are really, when the trailer's unloaded, they'll use a trailer jockey to move them from the loading dock. They'll put them in this space for either reloading or for pickup by the hauler to take it out of the site. They will not be container storage. They are just simply for partial or part-time parking for the trailers.
Can you just define part-time?
I think we would be within whatever the ordinance allows.
What does the ordinance allow?
I believe it's up to 48 hours, but I'm not 100% sure. We will be in we agree to be in full conformance with what the ordinance requirements.
What are we talking about, the storage?
Okay,
How long
we
the
brought
storage
this up
covers.
multiple times, and I think we've asked for clarification on it. So I would just request at some point, if it's not today, you clarify what's going to be stored and how long it's going to be there. The trailers,
On wheels.
yes.
Let's take a look at the warehouse across the street and see what it's like.
The final thing that I had a chance to look at, and this came out of some of the concerns that I'd heard previously throughout the preceding hearings, was some concern of the accidents and the speeding and the current conditions along Randolph Road. Again, we had the ability to collect some data from the police department here in Howell on that information. We requested the data for the last 3 years, both from speeding information as well as from crash records. And what we found was there are people speeding along Randolph Road, especially along the frontage of this area. And I think that's really a function of the fact there's nothing out there. It's a straight road with no driveways, and it's a cut through as you're cutting other points in town. There were actually, over that time period, 14 summonses and 15 warnings issued for speeding over 3 years. It's my opinion that based on the introduction of an actual development in this area, it's actually going to probably reduce that, I won't say ability, but that desire to speed through here, because there are things going on in the area. There will be vehicles turning to and from the Randolph Road. There will be tractor trailers traveling up and down the road at the speed limit. So I think that while there is that speeding going on, I don't think that the proposed development is going to exacerbate it, and it may actually improve that issue. The other thing we looked at was the actual accidents along the roadway and at the adjacent intersections. We were a specific concern at some of the driveways along here because we'll be introducing driveways along the roadway. And what we found is from 2016 to current, along Randolph Road, at the various driveways that are there currently between 547 and Oak Glen, there were nine total intersections. 5 of them at driveways over that span, with 2 rear ends and 2 fixed object errant vehicles traveling off the road. Now, when we look at ITE standards and we look at accident or crash information, really what we're looking at is maybe more than 5 within any 1 year that would be identifying a problem. And what we find is that we don't see that there, that the safety and the operation of the driveways that are currently along Randolph Road, they aren't having issues. There is an occasional accident, it happens, but there's not a safety concern because it doesn't reach the level of something that really should be studied. We also found at the intersection of Randolph Road and 547, 4 total accidents during that time period. Now, 3 of those are for vehicles turning from Randolph onto 547. This could be because people are impatient. It could be because it's currently operating at a level service F, and that's why people are taking smaller gaps. And I think the installation of a traffic signal at this location will eliminate that concern, that issue, because now we're giving the people exiting Randolph Road their own right-of-way where traffic is stopped along County Route 547. And so I think it will greatly increase the safety of that intersection.
Is that one of the applicant's proposed mitigations?
That is one of the applicant's proposed mitigations, that's correct. That's what was identified. Now, it's currently at a level of service F. We've identified that during the existing conditions. Then with the addition of 41 Randolph, it's going to be exacerbated. The background growth is going to exacerbate it. But it all boils down to the fact that people are impatient at this intersection because there's a capacity constraint. And so it's one of the applicant's proposals to build this traffic light. It's necessary to accommodate the traffic even in phase 1. So I think what we're doing here is actually improving the operation of that intersection.
Is the applicant paying for that traffic signal?
I think that's something that can be discussed. I think
It
that
should be
while it's
discussed, because if we're talking about a level F and a traffic signal,
There's an,
it's
I think
important.
his testimony is it's an existing F without this project.
Correct.
Right, we're not creating the problem.
It
The
will be
problem exists.
exacerbated by this traffic.
And the law, as I know you're aware, allows the board to assess against any applicant a contribution equal to their fair share based upon their contribution to the traffic. It's not last one in pays.
I
We
understand.
have shown the information with regard to this, premised upon the project that we've proposed. We have shown what the impact is. Maybe we should give them the easier view. But we've identified the fact that you have a failed condition today without this project.
Your traffic analysis improvements are based on a traffic signal.
That's correct.
Okay. Is it not fair to ask, is the traffic signal being proposed by you? And if not, how do you, then what would be the analysis if the traffic signal was not there? Because we can't determine whether there's a traffic signal based on your testimony going there or not.
We've given you the information as what it would be without the signal and what it would be with the signal, the same as the project you approved across the road.
So let's put that back on the record. What is it? It's a signal F now. What would it be with the project
Why don't you go through here?
without a signal?
Should we show, given this? Or no? Go ahead, just.
Yeah, I mean, so without the proposed improvements, it would be a level of service F.
Can you give us seconds?
It would be a delay of 665 seconds. Whereas what we consider no build, or the existing conditions plus the background growth plus the approved developments in the area, it would be an F of 297 seconds.
In the PM?
The PM Existing conditions plus background growth or no build is an F of 921 seconds. And then with the proposed project, it would be an F of 1,356 seconds.
And
I'm
that's at
sorry,
full
I'm
build?
sorry, Merrill, I'm sorry, that number again?
1,356.
How much queuing is that?
It queues approximately 600 to 700 feet.
How many vehicles for that PM approach with 1,356 seconds of delay?
Give it to them without us, too.
My problem is, we have no control. It's county road.
Doesn't matter. There's an application issue. Do they know if the county's
Well,
putting
that was only my question.
I know the answer.
Did they have, do you know if they required anything from the church for that signal? Because they weren't contributing to peak. Yeah. Thousand square foot for under 5,000. Your capacity analysis doesn't provide any queue lengths.
It does for that approach. It's about 55, 56 vehicles to save some time. That would correspond to about a length of about 1,300 to 1,400 feet, which
So-
would, I mean,
That's assuming about a 22-foot,
20, 25 feet.
yeah, per vehicle.
That puts you, the queuing across the project frontage from Randolph Road.
That's correct.
My-
Now,
my-
under the no build condition, it's also 41 vehicles,
Without our
right?
project.
Without the project.
My
Assuming
whole
no-
problem with this discussion is that that intersection, as everyone here knows, is under Monmouth County jurisdiction. So we can do all the supplement, all the posturing we want, all right? The fact of the matter is, this board, this town, does not have a decision in whether that's signalized, that intersection is signalized, or when it becomes signalized. And that's an issue. And I would like to know, have you discussed this? Have you presented your traffic study to the county for their consideration?
We have not submitted an application currently, although we have had preliminary meetings with Monmouth County to discuss the project. And at that point, the conversation of a signal was discussed. They understand that it's an issue. They were performing a corridor study along Route 547 in conjunction with a transfer station, which is now at the county from their consultant and under review. It's in draft form. It's not available to the public as of yet. But that, from the meeting, it was my impression that they understood the capacity constraints at this intersection, and it was something that they would be investigating as well.
But again, there's no guarantee that if this board approves the project, that intersection will be signalized.
Mr. Chairman, while I just want to chime in, this is one of those instances where we grant some submission waivers. So the county planning board application is a submission requirement for both the preliminary and final. You were in fact granted a submission waiver of that. But hearing the sentiment of the board, certainly this is one of those instances where if the board determines that this information is pertinent and needed to be supplied, it is part of our checklist that the application had been submitted to the county.
That waiver was granted.
It's a submission waiver, and when we grant submission waivers, we determine that it's for the purposes of deeming the application complete. However, if in fact the information is deemed warranted by the board, they can in fact request it.
That's the submission of the application, but not the approval by the county.
Submission of the application, that is correct.
Right, so that still doesn't get us any resolution as to whether this will be signalized, or the
Except
applicant...
that I don't think it's been submitted. I think what he just testified to is they haven't submitted it, they've only had preliminary hearings. And so to the extent that that application should be submitted so that the board can maybe get comments back from the county, I think is a fair point.
Do you need direction? Because if you need direction, I think that's a valid point.
Well, yeah, I know. I'm just, yes, I mean, obviously, we want to see the comments back from the county.
Which would require them to submit to the county.
But going beyond that, how do we get an assurance
May make it a no
that
interest letter.
the mitigations proposed are going to be implemented?
I'm not committing to the signal while they're still redesigning my site.
It's the county. We have,
We've had similar applications, and one that comes to mind is the Quick Check. There were extensive conversations prior to any approvals.
I thought that was with DOT.
It was with both, because Colts Neck Road is county.
Oh, that quick check. I thought you meant the one on here on 9.
So it's not unusual. We have faced this before.
Was that application on a county road? This is not.
The other thing I think is important to note is the application is here for preliminary and final.
So you're saying we have the option of just preliminary, waiting for the county to act on the mitigation?
If you wish to proceed, but again, that is a requirement for our preliminary site plan that the application be submitted. And, you know, I think there's other issues that were outlaid. I don't think the board's in any position to even entertain preliminary at this point, but the application as submitted is for preliminary and final.
Well, I agree with you.
And I'm sorry, didn't you say, Laura, that this would be part of the checklist?
Yes, we granted them a submission waiver of that item. And again, as you guys hear Ron and I say all the time, it's only for the purposes of deeming complete, and that if the information is deemed to be warranted, that's how the applicant is advised that they're
So
proceeding.
my understanding is at this point in time, this application is not complete.
No, that's not correct. They were granted the waiver for the purposes of deeming the application complete. What I'm advising is if the board feels that they should, at this point, submit that application so that we can potentially get comments from the county, you are entitled to have that. I think to the chairman's point, it's are we going to get the comments? But I think in fairness, they haven't yet even submitted the application, so we haven't even given the county any time to review it in detail or proffer back comments to the township.
So then, what the board is saying to you, that we need to have that application submitted to the county, and we need to get some comments back or some input back from Monmouth County as to whether your proposed mitigation is acceptable, and the time frame that the county would be having that intersection signalized, along with the other mitigation, the widening that you proposing.
That's not actually what I was hearing. I think your checklist only requires that we make a submission, not that there be comments back. You're saying that that's something the board would like, but the clock runs on the application regardless of whether the county responds or not. They may have a no interest. We're not fronting on a county road.
Well, if
They
you
may-
submit something, don't you think there's going to be a response? If it's a written response, or if it's a response that says, no interest, no comment, we don't
Within their
care?
time frame, there would be, yes. But that doesn't mean that there are comments, and all I'm saying is your checklist, as I understand it, requires that the application be submitted, not that comments be returned. By submitting the application, we will have satisfied that requirement.
It would satisfy me for the very least for it to be submitted. And that's at the very least. So I don't really know how I don't feel I can go further with an intelligent thought process without this submission. So,
There's
I'm
other-
not here to beg the applicant to do something that I'd like done, but I think that it's reasonable to assume that if I don't feel that I have all the information, I don't know how I can make a decision. So, think it through.
It's not like done, it's required.
The submission of the application
Correct.
is a checklist item.
Correct.
That is all, as I understand it.
Correct.
And
the
I've said that
checklist
3 or
requires.
4 times now. Please submit.
And we've indicated we will.
Thank
But that is all that's required in your checklist. I'll say it again, too.
I heard you twice.
Okay. What else have we got? The safety we covered.
This doesn't give us any resolution.
Just 1 second, we're just checking our outline.
Give us the resolutions.
Well, you're gonna have to come back, so it's gonna have to be a date when you're here, right? Because we've got to bring in you've got to make that submission with time.
Yes,
Mr. Chair.
Counsel.
Since there's additional traffic information, which means that our traffic witness is going to have to come back. So rather than making sure we've covered all the points, since we're going to have to come back at the very least to discuss the entrances, we would be satisfied to finish this evening, this witness for the evening. I don't know how you want to proceed, but obviously if we're submitting plans, we need some additional time, because I know your consultants will need to review them.
Right.
We
So
do have our
is-
planner
Is
here.
Mr. Taylor's testimony completed now?
It's completed only for this evening,
For this evening, yes. All right.
subject to our recalling him to address those issues and any others that come up in the process.
Does the board have any questions that they would like to ask of Mr. Taylor?
I do. I'd like, since he's going to be working on the internal circulation, like to maybe explain my particular concern. That way you can come back properly prepared. Do we happen to have a laser pointer or anything like that?
We have one.
You do? Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
Oh, do you need a break?
I don't trust him at all with that thing.
What's that? Is it just press the button?
It should work now.
There we go.
Let somebody else.
So as I had tried to articulate earlier, when a truck comes in this way and then has to stop and back in, thank you, Laura. So when a truck comes in and then has to turn and back in this way, I understand that that gives them, that allows them to not be in the circulation aisle while they're making that movement. But in my opinion, it's a more blind movement. I drive an RV. I have a 30-foot RV. So if I can drive into a parking spot going this way and then pulling in this way, I can look out my driver's window and see what I'm pulling into a lot easier than if I'm using my mirrors and having to pull in this way. But I then went ahead and did a quick scale of the drawing that I have in front of me. And when I looked at, let's say they did go this way, or they came in another driveway and they came up this way, they would then have to pull out this way and then pull into the spot. And from my rough fuzzy math, it looks like they're going to be pulling into the circulation element in order to make these maneuvers. These first few spots may not be adequate if a truck happens to go this way and go that way. So when you do your truck movements, if you could please look at those particular points. And it looks like that's consistent throughout the facility, except for maybe these points here where you have these larger coming into the center of the aisle entrances. You also have the same similar situation in the other parts of the site. Ms. Newman, if you could open up the site again. So if you could just zoom in right in this area, please. Same similar situation. If a truck comes this way and needs to park in this spot here, they have to pull out into this circulation traffic and then back into it. And same similar scenario in here, here, and also in the southern portion of the site as well. So when you're looking at your traffic.
I don't think that's a loading dock.
What's it? Well, if the truck's coming, let's say the truck comes this way, right? How do they get to that spot? They gotta pull out into this traffic and then pull in. And then back into the loading dock.
I'm Brian.
A professional driver
I'm done.
is taught to back in right or left without any problems.
That's true.
And I spent 40 years in the industry. Otherwise, he's not going to be on the road driving a truck.
Thank you for that, Mr. Boyle. Does anybody else have questions? All right, I have a couple here. All right. You counted, or you analyzed two intersections on Lakewood Farmingdale Road, one at Herbertsville Road and one at Maxim Road. Now, I think everybody here in this room understands that majority of the traffic is going to be bound to and from 195, all right? So it's coming down or going up Lakewood Farmingdale Road. Can you tell me the rationale on why only those two signalized intersections were counted, where there are multiple stop-controlled intersections between Herbertsville and Randolph Road?
So while your ordinance has no guidance on the study area that's necessary for a study such as this, the DOT typically says you would look at unsignalized intersections within 1,500 feet of your access point. That takes us approximately to Lakewood Farmingdale Road. So what we wanted to know, knowing that there are points of conflict along Lakewood Farmingdale, we analyzed those signalized intersections and provided the analysis for them.
Professionally, you're here in front of this board with a rather large traffic-generating application. Do you think professionally that that's an acceptable answer?
Yes, I do. I've been through your ordinance looking for the guidance on what
Put the
intersections.
ordinance on the side. As a professional, as a traffic professional, all right? Wouldn't, I mean, the objective of a traffic impact study is to divulge the impacts, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right? You're going to be impacting all these other non-signalized intersections, and they probably will suffer a greater impact on the minor street or the stop-controlled approach. The ramifications there are much greater.
Understanding your concern, looking now at the phase 4 total site-generated traffic, on either one of the approach movements, we're generating less than 100 trips. Right? Northbound, we're less than 100. Southbound, we're less than 100. So based on that, we did not feel that the impact was going to be that great through the stop-controlled intersections.
I'm sorry.
Well, you have no idea because you have no idea what the volumes are on the side streets.
When performing a traffic impact study, I start with the local municipal ordinance. That's the law that governs this town. When that guidance isn't there, we start to look at higher order reviewing agencies. So when I couldn't find an idea or a requirement for what was supposed to be studied, we looked to the DOT. And we also looked at the county signalized intersections through the area and determined that was the areas that needed to be studied.
Since your witness is coming back, I hear what he's saying. You hear what I'm saying, all right? Just consider looking at some of the other more critical stop-controlled intersections.
For what purpose? How could you attract, what could you do?
Wait till he gets this next one, he's going to choke. He did the traffic counts on a Friday night. Next to Lakewood.
Right, actually, yeah, right. Double check. I need it for this professional. Need it now.
What?
Are there any plans to put the exit ramps on 95?
Hold on, I got more questions, I'll get to you first, all right? Can I ask more questions of Mr. Taylor?
Certainly.
So, I'm now referring to A7, all right? And you used the McDonough-Ray traffic counts. Are you aware that the traffic counts for the intersection of 547 and Randolph Road, and also for the intersection of Oak Glen Road and Randolph Road were conducted on a Friday. Specifically, 547 in Randolph was done on September 14th, 2018, and Oak Glen and Randolph was done on Friday, September 7th.
Yes, that's correct.
Are you aware of the Jewish tradition of Shabbos, Sabbath, and that they have to have their meal and they have to be in temple by sundown?
Yes.
Would you offer a professional opinion as to the appropriateness of counting traffic on a Friday evening in the town that is adjacent to a very heavily Jewish population?
What was the peak hour?
3:30 to 4:30.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, and I mean, these counts were conducted by McDonough Ray as the initial submission to the board. They were coordinated with the board and with the board professionals, and they've been utilized as part of this study.
I'm sorry. Our traffic engineer is shaking his head no. And
They were not reviewed?
I don't know if they were reviewed.
The comment was, it was done in coordination. We certainly do not coordinate and tell you when to take your counts.
I misspoke, absolutely. Let me retract that statement. We picked up this project from McDonough Ray with a review letter and comments that we then addressed. And nowhere within it was it questioned that the traffic counts were there. So in order to stipulate beyond that and not introduce new information, we utilized the background traffic. We changed the development program to eliminate the office that was originally proposed, and we resubmitted the analyses. We didn't see any issue with utilizing their volumes because nothing was brought up in the initial review letter of the project. So we proceeded.
Let me ask you, and the peak hour, the PM peak for the road was what time?
For Lakewood, Farmingdale, and Randolph was 3:30 to 4:30.
Which means that Shabbos didn't start until sundown in September,
Right.
which means it was probably 3 hours or more after that.
And I can tell you, if you compare the volumes on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday along Lakewood Farmingdale Road, as opposed to Friday evening, all right, you will see a precipitous drop. And I would request, if you're going to take that position and you're going to use the Friday night traffic volumes, show me an ATR that shows me that there's no difference between your peak hour volumes on a Friday and that during the other 4 days of the week. Yeah, I got another one.
I hear you.
The capacity analyses shown in Appendix C show a peak hour factor of 0.92 for every movement of every intersection studied during both the AM and the PM peak hours. The intersection counts, which are in Appendix B, show peak hour factors ranging from 0.375 to 0.596. Now, don't you think that it's more appropriate to use the actual peak hour factors?
I do. Are you looking at the network peak hour factors?
I'm looking at the capacity analysis in Appendix C.
Can you point me to which intersection you're looking at? Because I see peak hour factors of 0.97, 0.95, 0.97,
So let's go with...
0.91.
Let's go with the first
0.96.
intersection, existing AM, Lakewood Farmingdale Road and Randolph Road. Okay?
Yes,
Peak hour factor,
0.92.
0.92, straight across. The next page,
Mr. Chairman, just
Yes.
for 1 second, it's the guidance of the Highway Capacity Manual nowadays to utilize an intersection peak hour for analysis. So it's going to show you .92 across the board, because that's the guidance provided by the federal government.
Well, that's suggested, all right, but it's also overstating the capacity when you look at the peak hour factors of your traffic counts. Okay? And if you want to go with the intersection peak hour factor, and I'm looking at the combined group, I saw intersections. I mean, if you want to do that, the second intersection of Oak Glen and Randolph, the overall intersection is .871, okay? So you contemplate on how you want to redo the analyses. Again, I'm not trying to pick on you, but we're trying to show what the actual impacts are.
Completely understand.
Can I make a comment?
Yes, Chief?
So obviously, understanding our Jewish culture next door to our neighbors and understanding the traffic flow, there is a higher volume of vehicles leaving Lakewood on a Friday afternoon, traveling to the Catskills and also to Brooklyn. So a traffic study on a Friday afternoon is going to produce a higher amount of vehicles than there are during a weekday.
But they're looking at the traffic between 4 and 6 o'clock at night. And most of those vehicles, in order to reach the Catskills,
Right, I understand
are
that.
leaving much earlier.
Right, before sundown, I
No,
get that, I understand
They're
that.
looking at 3:30 to 4:30, right?
We look 3:30,
3:30 to 4:30.
and we conduct counts from 3:30 to 6:30.
Show me an ATR that bears that out, and that'll be the end of the discussion. On your resubmission, I'm sorry, I couldn't find the queue lengths shown on the capacity analyses.
So I can point them out to you now, if you want to look.
We could do that on the side,
Okay, absolutely.
all right? And is that the, oh, okay. I missed that one. My bad. All right. Can we put the proposed mitigations for each intersection on the record? I don't know if we've ever stated it.
I think we've identified possible solutions to most of these intersections. I think it's been committed that we would be widening Oak Glen Road to provide left turn lanes both at Randolph Road and at Lakewood Avenue Road. And I believe that will then incorporate the widening that's associated with the church to allow essentially an eastbound or southbound right turn lane onto Oak Glen.
And the other two intersections on Lakewood Farmingdale Road?
Along Lakewood Farmingdale, there are minor signal modifications. So it's really just a reallocation of green time. There's no geometric improvements that are part of those improvements.
Have you observed the intersection of Lakewood Farmingdale Road and 549
Yep.
Herbertsville Road
Yes, I have.
during the evening peak hour?
Yes, I have.
How far does that southbound queue back up?
Probably to 195 eastbound. And I can tell you that Monmouth County has identified that and is currently researching improvements to the intersection. It's been identified for them for the last 4 or 5 years. They've gone through several design alternatives, and I believe they're nearing a preferred alternative at this point to alleviate that situation. But it is something that we are aware of, the county's aware of, and obviously everyone who drives to that intersection is aware of.
And your timing mitigation assumes assumes improvement or assumes the existing geometry?
It assumes the existing geometry, given the fact that our volumes are through volumes on that and not the turning mover. The heavy maneuver southbound is really turning onto Herbertsville Road. It's that left turn lane that backs up and the fact that there aren't 2 lanes coming from 195 ramps. Being is that our volume, especially in the evening, is much more oriented northbound to return to 195. We were able to mitigate the traffic associated with the project with minor single timing modifications.
So you're adding time to the northbound approach to mitigate your impact, correct?
I would say yes, but let me just verify.
Mr. Chairman, while he's looking for that, our reporter will need to recharge the battery on her machine if we can break at some point once he
Okay.
gets the answer to this.
Why don't we get the answer to this? You could have just, put your hands up and waved, yes.
Yes, it's a reallocation of time to the northbound, southbound.
All right, I'm going to give I'm going to give everyone a break because we've been going at it for over 2 hours. So we're going to take a 10-minute break.
The planning board will now reconvene.
Eileen, please call the roll again so we know we didn't lose anybody.
Mr. Boyle?
Present.
Mr. Dorado?
Here.
Mr. Husser was excused. Chief Kudrick?
Here.
Mr. Nacastro?
Here.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Tannenhouse?
Here.
Mr. Seaman?
Here.
Mr. Everett?
Here.
Deputy Mayor O'Donnell?
Here.
Chairman Nash?
Present.
You have a quorum and everyone's still in attendance.
Okay, great. All right, just a couple of more questions. At the last couple of meetings, we asked that you meet with the, sorry. I said a couple of more questions. At the previous meetings, we had asked if you would meet with the fire chief from Station 19-4, Ramtown Station. That's the first responding station. Have you done that? And if so, what was the result of the meeting?
So, yes, we attended a meeting. It was one of my partners on June 10th with the Ramtown Fire Company. And they essentially said that their purview of review is the fire hydrant locations, and that there were sufficient fire hydrants proposed throughout the site to meet their requirements, and that they do not review access to the site. That was their standpoint, that they did not review access, only the location of fire hydrants.
For the record, my colleague also went with them to that meeting.
Okay. All right. Believe it or not, that's the end of my questions. Does the board have any more questions for this witness? No? Seeing none, Mr. Boson?
Mr. Chairman, if I could, is it possible, I think Jim had some questions?
Oh, I apologize. Go ahead.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I'll try to make it quick. One of my biggest concerns is with the Randolph and Lakewood Farmingdale Road intersection and the discussion on this traffic signal. And the way the study's written right now, it's kind of like assuming the signal's going to be installed, yet they're not committing to installing it themselves. So relying on that, you're relying on the township or the county who have no idea about the need for a signal or a planned project, is my understanding at this time. So I think the applicant needs to address, if the signal doesn't go in, what happens? I mean, you have a distribution now with about 50% of the traffic going through the Randolph, Farmingdale intersection. If there's 988 seconds of delay in the no-build condition, you're not going to have 50% of the traffic going that direction. They're going to go right. They're going to go down to Oak Glen and get to Lakewood Farmingdale another way. Now, there's not going to be, and then I understand the applicant's limiting trucks, towards Lakewood Farmingdale, but that's just a sign. There's no, I don't know how it's going to be enforced. I mean, there's no weight limit restrictions on Randolph. There's no weight limit restrictions on Oak Glen Road. So I think the applicant just needs to be prepared. If that signal never goes in, how does that change your study? I think the study would have to be completely reevaluated.
So would the applicant, when he's redoing the driveways, would you be adverse for the truck driveways to skew the radii so that you almost prevent a truck from being able to make the right turn to go east on Randolph Road.
I think that's something we definitely can investigate, absolutely.
But
Okay,
it's also
that-
the passenger vehicles too. And there's a high volume of passenger vehicles that would now be deterred from going left just because of the delay. And you know, what does that do? What does that increase volume, you know, going to the right now or going to the south do on the road network?
I agree. I hear what you said. The board has expressed
Yeah.
our concern. The issue is, as you well know, because the intersection is under the jurisdiction of Monmouth County, there is only so much we can do. The applicant has also represented that they are willing to pay their fair share of the improvement. Correct, Counselor?
We will do what the statute requires us to do under Section 42.
Who, the township or the county? Who do you pay that to?
Well, let me ask this. You've recently approved another warehouse across the road. The circumstances were the same. You have a developer's agreement where a percentage was required for their contribution.
Which site do we have a developer's agreement for?
40, I think she's...
41 Randolph does
41
not have a
Randolph.
developer's agreement. They're still in a resolution compliance stage, of which this is one of the outstanding items.
Okay. I thought we were provided a developer's agreement to look at. I will double check. We were given some documentation from council.
Okay, they don't have a letter of compliance from my office, so I know my last resolution compliance letter specifically notes that this item remains outstanding.
Okay.
So the bottom line
An
is...
approval was granted with the issue to be resolved.
Right, so we'll handle you the same way that we handled 41 Randolph.
If it's in compliance with the state statute, then
Yes.
that's all we can ask for.
Right. That's a problem that the board is going to have to struggle with.
I'm just really concerned about the site driveway access to Randolph Road with that issue pending of the existing failing condition at Randolph and Lakewood Farmingdale Road. I don't think their site access plan will work as presented if that signal doesn't go in, and we're not, nobody's committing to it. So you got to plan for what's going to exist at the time based on what we have now.
I think when you come back, you will have submitted to Monmouth County. If you can also give us an overview or a briefing as to where you stand at that point with the review process with Monmouth County, if you could feel them out for when they think they're going to generate comments, if any, on your application, so the board has more guidance as to where they're going.
And then just to Mr. Winkowski's point, they agreed earlier to submit their level of service calculations for their site access points. If in fact they're relying upon that signal being installed, they also need to run the level of service calculations for the site access drives, because those are absolutely under the purview of this board, to see what service levels those would operate with if the signal was not installed.
Yeah, taking into account that the queuing is spilling back across several of their access points.
Yeah, and include analyzing the distribution, assuming that, you know, if you go one way, there's 1,000 seconds of delay. If you go the other way, there's no delay. And the other way is through Oakland Road.
Chairman, I don't want to get into what we can and can't do. We all know that part, but we do have a responsibility to know the adversary effects on all the other roadways.
Yes.
So that's why we ask for traffic studies. So I just don't want to put it out there that we don't have any say because it's a county light. I mean, I've been on this board, Paul has been on this board for 12 years and much longer. We do take that into consideration. So I'm very concerned about that traffic signal, and I definitely want to hear what we plan on doing if that traffic light is not coming. Because it will have an adverse effect on our roadways. Significant. And you can't tell me one application that we have 1 million square foot of warehousing in Howell Township with proposed of over 300 spots for trucks and 700 spots for vehicles. So we need to address that.
Okay. Professionals? Peter, you have something?
Yeah, quick comment and a quick line of questioning. I just wanted to make you aware that the trailer parking area, trailer parking is an accessory use, but as per the ordinance, it's also outdoor storage. So outdoor storage is limited to be located in a screened rear yard. So although trailer parking is customary and incidental to this type of use, technically, I think you may need a variance for that. It's going to depend on the timing. Testimony as far as how long the trailers are going to be parked there, I think that's going to be a factor, but I know they have agreed to provide that information next time.
Well, Peter, wouldn't that be more appropriate for the planner to address?
It would be, but just to the extent it ties in with traffic and parking, I wanted to mention it now.
I'm just curious, has something changed in the ordinance? Because this is the first that we're hearing.
No, we discussed this 2 hearings ago where we
No,
took,
excuse me. I think the way he's interpreting it, this is the first we've heard about screening and how somehow, whether, depending on the timing, it impacts whether or not there's a variance.
We've
where-
requested testimony on the timing for the past 2 hearings, at least, and we've yet to receive it. And that's a key variable in this determination.
Can you just then please say what you said again, how those two things tie together?
So permitted accessory uses include those that are customary and incidental to the permitted use.
Right.
And also they include outdoor storage, which shall be permitted in a screened rear yard only. Now, while the trailer parking is an accessory use, it's also outdoor storage, and that's how it ties together.
Okay, and is there a section that defines it as outdoor storage as opposed to parking? Since it's a vehicle on wheels?
There's, yeah, there's
if I
no.
could clarify or just echo the sentiment, that's why we asked how long the vehicles were going to stand there. Mr. Catani had testified about this previously, and he said that vehicles would be there, trailers would be there, and we said, how long would they be there? I believe you provided some level of detail review of our ordinance, however, it wasn't under the land use section of the code. And when we referred back to the land use section, which is the section Peter reviewed under the permitted uses, that's where we talked about this outdoor storage. I would agree that it's probably pertinent for your planner to address, but we wanted to know the time duration that it sits there. Does it move every 2 hours, or does it move every 24, 48 hours, or does it move weekly? And I think that information, I definitely know I'm still unclear on. I think today, Mr. Taylor testified that it's 48 hours in our code, and what I can tell you is I haven't seen that it's 48 hours in our code. And so I don't know that he was the witness for it, but I think at some point we need to get there, because if in fact this is outdoor storage, even though it is a vehicle on a trailer, but it's not moving, and it is a outdoor storage area per se, it is not in a screened rear yard, which is what's required under the code.
Yes, Mr. Schneider?
My concern of what I've heard tonight about this use could be retail. And that is a very big concern to me. If it is within our ordinance that this use could change traffic patterns.
So, Peter, could you just restate what you had represented a while ago about the ability to have retail sale?
Sure. Retail sales is also a permitted accessory use. It's only a permitted accessory use as it relates to warehousing and distribution facilities. And it's under the condition that provided the percent of floor area devoted to retail use shall be limited to 1,000 square feet or 5% of the gross floor area, whichever is less. So that's 1,000 square feet or 5% of the gross floor area, whichever is less.
So if they had a 100,000 square foot building, Paul, they would still be limited to 1,000 square feet of retail per building. Yes. I guess it means that there is a very small area that would be available for retail.
Correct.
Correct?
And
And it
just,
has to be related, right?
So you could
yes, it would have to be related to the,
Related to the warehouse, not an
absolutely.
independent retail.
Yep, that's correct. And just a quick question, if I may. Unrelated to those two topics, the paved area between buildings C and D, and also between H and I just wanted to get a sense of what, obviously, other than the drive aisles and vehicle circulation, what kind of activities may occur there? Because I didn't see any delineated parking. It seems like there's light poles with a hatched area around it.
That is correct. The only location on the site for trailer parking is to the west between A and B. The area between C and D is to be utilized for the drive aisles and the access to the loading docks. There are light poles proposed through the middle there, but there's no trailer parking.
Okay. And any type of, I know it's maybe early to say, but any type of staging area, any other activities proposed for that location? Or is it just additional
We don't
area?
anticipate any other activities in that area.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions from professionals? Okay. Mr. Boson? Can I just ask, can I get a feel for how long you think this is going to take?
Well, that was actually going to be my question, because it seems like there's going to be a lot of revisions or changes potentially made in clarifications from the traffic engineer, so I don't believe I can ask a lot of the questions if these clarifications are going to take place.
Okay, because the reason is that I really would like to get the public an opportunity. The applicant has indicated that the traffic engineer will be coming back, all right? So I would respectfully ask, would you object to holding your questions to when he comes back so we can open it up to the public?
Absolutely.
All right,
I
thank
can
you.
absolutely do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, you've been sitting out there for all this time. If anyone would like to come up and ask questions, they have to be traffic-related questions. If you would like to ask questions as a witness, please step up to the podium. Really, I mean, this is fascinating
If
stuff.
they're represented, they can't.
This-
Well, they may be represented.
If I can, any members of the public, if you're part of the group that's represented by Mr. Boston or another attorney, then please ask your questions through your attorney. But if you're not within that group, you're free to ask questions. If you can, just please state your name.
Hi, my name is Marie Woolley. I live on Victory Road. I've lived in Howell Township for 55 years.
Hold on.
Marie Woolley. Woolley.
And your address?
I live on Victory Road.
Do they have to be sworn?
If you're asking questions of the witness, this is really question time, not comment time. If you're asking questions of Mr. Taylor, then you can just ask the question. If you're going to be offering testimony, which is really not appropriate now, the comment is really, that's for later on in the proceedings. This is if you have a question about Mr. Taylor's traffic testimony.
The question is about traffic.
Okay.
Okay, sure.
Yeah,
Then you don't have,
all right. Since I live on Victory Road and I get out of Victory Road onto 547, I am very concerned about the increase in traffic. That has to happen. Has to happen. As it is now, there are times I can't even get out of
Ma'am,
Victory Road.
I need, what's your question?
Question is, how is this going to impact the traffic on 547?
Okay. Mr. Taylor?
Based on the analysis that we performed, the increase in traffic at the intersections that we studied can be accommodated with minor signal timing modifications to the intersections.
That's his answer. Oh, is
Are you using the mic?
the mic on?
Yeah, I think we're still good. Am I holding it up?
Maybe you have to hold it closer.
Sorry, I apologize about that. So, like I stated, the analyses that we performed show that minor signal modifications to the intersections can be done to accommodate the traffic proposed from the project.
What intersection do you use to get out to 547?
On Victory Road.
So, Ms. Taylor, she's asking about the intersection of Taylor Road and 547.
Victory Road.
I'm sorry, Victory Road.
Yeah, which is,
It's late for me.
that's, me too.
That's not an intersection that we've studied as part of our analysis.
Well, I wish you would, because I have trouble getting out there as it is now. The traffic is backed up.
I've asked the applicant to look at the unsignalized intersections, so we will see what he comes back with at the next meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Your name and address, please?
My name is Catherine Moore, and I live at
Could you spell for the stenographer?
Catherine Moore. I live at 757 Oak Glen Road. Moore. Okay. I have a question in regards to all this traffic. This is the first meeting that I've been to. I was unaware that this was happening. I live on Oak Glen Road from Randolph. I'm the fourth house on the right. So, with all this traffic, what about the noise pollution? Have we addressed this?
Well, that's not this applicant's expertise.
But doesn't that have to do with the amount of traffic that is coming in the area with the tractor trailers?
Unfortunately, ma'am, this was discussed at an earlier meeting where the applicant put on an expert who spoke about the amount of traffic, all right?
So,
I'm sorry, about the amount of noise.
okay, so then you touched on it lightly then.
Well, we didn't touch on it lightly, we addressed it. We asked questions about it, and it was represented, if I remember correctly, and the board, please correct me if I'm wrong, that this would not have an adverse effect on the neighborhood in the way of noise.
And that to me doesn't make sense, because if we're gonna have all these tractor trailers that are coming and all this other vehicle traffic, how is that noise not gonna affect us? I mean, my house right now sits 145 feet from the road. I planted 2 berms on the side to reduce the noise, because I do have tractor trailers that come down my street now. Estes, FedEx, UPS, tandem trucks that go over to the Leaf Place over there on Randolph, all right, the French's property. And they come down my street. One of the Estes driver who comes to my job, I work in an industrial park at Marlboro, and I've asked him, why do you come down my street? He honks at me when he sees me at the mailbox, because he says to me it's easier. Instead of going down 9 and making a left on County Line, it's easier to cut through Oak Glen Road. So when he comes down, I can hear him from my living room. I hear it. So you can't tell me there isn't going to be noise pollution that isn't going to affect the residents. We're going to be the cut-through for this. Now, this gentleman here, Justin Taylor, you made a statement earlier that there were going to be signs, right, for the traffic. Is there going to be a sign that says everybody's got to go down Randolph to go to 547? What's going to prevent them from coming down my street? How is this going to be policed? All this traffic? Is it going to fall on Howell Police Department?
Hold on, you asked him a question, please give him a chance to respond.
So we are proposing, as the plan exists, to sign it for no left turn for tractor trailers out of the site. So that would prohibit the tractor trailers from driving past your house. We would orient them all towards 547.
Only tractor trailers, no cars?
Sir,
Sir, you gotta wait.
Well,
till-
this is my husband.
So tractor
He lives-
trailers are being prohibited
Okay.
from traveling to the east along Randolph Road.
So I have tractor trailers now coming. Nobody's policing this. And I'm going to add something else. 9 years ago, when I bought my property and I saw the amount of traffic, the way they drive very fast, that it's difficult for me to get to my mailbox. I've already replaced my mailbox 5 times in 9 years. I called the Howell Police Department. I gave them permission, because I have a circular driveway, for them to keep their cars there so they can catch these people that are violating the speed limit, okay? So, you know, all this traffic that we're having, the noise, the pollution,
ma'am, if
this
you-
is going to be a problem.
Ma'am,
And the traffic,
I'm
the
asking
traffic.
you, when you want to offer testimony, there's a time to do that, all right? I'm asking if you want to ask questions specifically. You can come back, I will let you go as
Okay.
long as you want,
Okay,
okay?
thank you. I
Chairman,
appreciate it.
is there a resource we can have her turn to that's up online? Eileen, with previous testimony, where she can look on it?
All-
on the
Yes,
video?
if
All
she
the
goes
videos.
to the agenda, all the dates of the hearings are listed there, and you can watch all the videos online and answer all your questions.
All right, thank you
And I
so
know
much.
they're there because I had to watch them,
That's
two
right.
of them, in order to be prepared for
Well,
this
we know
meeting.
you like that.
I'm good.
If you look
Nice bottle of
online,
wine in the planning board meeting, that's you.
if you look online, when I first found out about this, and I Googled it, you're gonna see that it comes up, Monmouth Commerce Center. And the data that you provided is totally different than what's online. Instead of 706 vehicle spaces, it's higher than that. It says 786.
Well,
The
ma'am-
numbers don't jive with
Ma'am,
what this
you have-
gentleman said.
You have to go to the official township website that has the videos of every one of the meetings that we've had, all right?
Okay, I will.
You could have Googled some other site. I don't know what you Googled.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
Your name, please?
Mary Rose Malley,
Spell the last name
Malley,
and your address.
730 Oak Glen Road. Full disclosure, I am a school board member, but I am not here in that capacity. I'm
Okay,
here as a
and
resident.
You are not represented by...
I am not representing the school board in any way.
No, you're not represented by Hope, are you?
I am not represented by Hope either,
Okay.
no.
Sure, please ask your questions.
Okay. I believe, Mr. Chairman, that you mentioned that the traffic studies that were held were in September of 2018, is that correct?
Yes.
We conducted traffic counts, yes, in various times. We have September of 2008, yep.
Okay, as many of you know, I'm sure you're all aware, that in August, there was a very bad rainstorm that affected the bridges in Ramtown section of Howell. There was one bridge that was damaged on Lakewood Allenwood Road for quite a time, and the other one on Ramtown Greenville was out for over 6 months. The entire traffic pattern for that entire area of town was completely altered when those bridges were closed. If this study was taking place when the bridges were closed, then that really does affect the numbers. And I think you need to have another look at that as well.
Let Mr. Taylor respond to that.
This was a concern that came up as part of the original application for this project when McDonough and Ray was doing the traffic study. There's a letter to the effect that they proved that the times the traffic counts were done, that the bridges through this area were not closed. So it was reviewed by your professionals at the time that the counts were conducted, that the traffic patterns and all the bridges in the area were intact. They were not the ones that were impacted through the area.
Okay, well, the
M-
bridge on
Mr.
Ramtown
Mr.
Greenville
Taylor?
Road was closed for
Mr.
6
Taylor,
months, starting in
where-
August.
Where is
So-
that represented?
That was submitted, I believe, with the initial application to this project. I'm coming back, I could provide the documentation that was part of the McDonough and Ray when they originally conducted the traffic study. But it was an issue that was raised and investigated and put back to rest in the fact that the traffic counts were conducted and the traffic patterns were typical of what would be expected out there.
So the applicant is representing that he will come back with the data to prove your concern that the traffic patterns in the area were not impacted by it, all right? Or when can you provide this, Counsel? When can you provide this to Ms. Rabano?
But we will, I don't know, what do we have to go back?
I want to give the public an opportunity to review it if they want to come down to town
Well, it
hall.
has to be more than 10 days before the next hearing. We're going to be submitting revised plans showing the access, so
Right,
it will be...
but this one particular document,
attempt to locate the documentation. It was, I remember actually having conversations about it too. I don't remember if it was at early meetings. We'll submit it in advance of the next hearing.
Okay, so what I will ask, if you're interested, they will present it at the next meeting for sure. They have to have all their documents in 10 days before the meeting date. You can call Ms. Urbano and ask her if that's been submitted, and if you would like, then you can come down and review it prior to the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Just because the bridge was closed in September. It was closed in August. The storm was in August, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
Joan Osborne,
You speak in the mic, please.
Joan Osborne, Osborne, 28 Bronia Street, Howell. I have a question of the chairman at first. Given that there's going to be revisions and...
You speak in the mic, please.
Given that there's going to be revisions and additional testimony, by questioning now, would I be foreclosed on questioning on any additional information after he comes
No,
back?
not at all. When
Okay.
he comes back, we will reopen it to the public.
Okay, thank you. I had some questions about the McDonough and Ray report. Is it that they prepared or conducted all the traffic count work that's included in your report?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so you...
Two McDonough. Excuse me, I just want to clarify. There's two traffic, there were two McDonough. There was the McDonough and Ray that we started out with them as our consultant, and there was also a McDonough and Ray report that we referenced this evening for the church.
Okay.
I'm just asking for clarification, which one you're asking about.
I'm asking about the one that was done for this project.
Okay.
So they were the traffic consultant, and they submitted an initial report, which included counts that they conducted?
That's correct.
Okay, and did you meet with them to discuss the methods that they used for conducting the count?
Yes, I had conversations with him once we took over the job.
Okay, and were you satisfied that they conducted their counts in accordance with standards that are utilized with these type of traffic studies?
Yes, I was.
Okay, and what was it about what they told you that made you satisfied that they did it correctly?
It was an encompassment of the peak hours that are consistent with a warehouse development.
Okay, now, in determining what the peak hours for traffic in the area would be, what did they do?
They conducted the traffic counts between 7 and 10 and 3:30 and 6:30, and I believe they based it on their extensive knowledge of the area.
Okay, and why do you believe that they based it on their extensive knowledge of the area? Did they tell you that? Or is that an assumption you're making?
It's a conversation that we had, and knowing the work that they do and the amount that they're testifying, both at this board, in Lakewood, in the surrounding neighborhoods, I'm fully aware of their competence and their knowledge of the local area.
And other than the study that they did for the church, do you know if they've done any other studies in this area to determine what the actual peak hours are for traffic?
I know that they have conducted other studies in Lakewood. I do not know all the studies and all the jobs that they actually work on.
Okay, so you're not aware of them doing any other studies in Howell, in this neighborhood?
No, they conducted the study for 41 Randolph on Randolph Road, directly across the street.
And do you know the time frame where they did that study?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Okay. Did you consider that there could be other peak hours that should be studied given the school schedules?
We felt that the peak commuting hour was the most appropriate hours to study through this area, given the industrial nature of Randolph Road.
And you assumed that Randolph Road was an industrial nature?
Given the existing uses along the roadway, yes.
Okay. And if you assumed that it was residential, would you have adjusted the peak hours to a different set of time parameters?
No, not really.
Okay. So would it be fair to say that regardless of the character of the area, you would be using the same set of hours as being the peak hours?
Depending on the use proposed for the site, we would most likely be utilizing the same peak hours.
Okay. Now, would it be fair to say that by having someone conduct a count by just standing out there and counting or laying some type of counter out there, you get less reliable information than if you had done a videotape recording of the area to see how many vehicles are coming through and where they're turning?
No, I do not.
You believe that it's more accurate to just do it this way?
I do.
Why do you
I
believe
believe
that?
there's equal accuracy in a human counting traffic as opposed to a video.
And why do you believe that?
Because
Double check when people count manually?
No, but I trust the profession and the people that are that do the counts.
Okay, and do you know how the count was done in this case? Was it done with laying a hose across the road that counts tires going over it, or was it somebody actually standing out there and observing?
It was done with people standing out there and observing.
Okay, and do you know who the people were?
I do not know.
Okay, and you have no idea of how they count or whether they're reliable, do you?
I trust the professional nature of McDonough and Ray to conduct a study and conduct traffic counts.
Okay, but did you do anything to verify the accuracy of what McDonough and Ray provided you?
No, I did not.
Was there any discussion with McDonough and Ray as to how to identify the correct criteria for trips generated information?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, you indicated that you used the warehouse usage to identify the expected number of trip generations. And is that something they provided you with?
That's something that in their first version of the study, they also utilized the Institute of Transportation Engineers publication, Trip Generation.
Okay, and so you adopted what they had given you?
No, I followed standard traffic engineering practice, identified the land use that's proposed for the job, and utilized that.
Okay, and did you use the same data that they were using for trip generation?
Yes, we both utilized the 10th edition of ITE Trip Generation.
Okay, and because I don't do this generally, can you tell me what information you get from ITE when you have identified a usage? What do they give you?
So it's broken down into peak hour trip generation. And so it's broken down by independent variable. You typically, for a warehouse, you would look at square footage. And it provides peak hour traffic generation based on either a rate or an equation that would be generated onto the surrounding roadway network.
Well, do you get anything from ITE identifying the character of the location where the square footage is located?
You mean that goes into the data?
That they provide you. If you tell them it's a 1 million square foot warehouse, do they just give you a number, or do they tell you this is what you can expect from a 1 million square foot warehouse in a city, or this is what you can expect if it's in the middle of the country, or here's what you can expect if it's in a suburb?
Understand your question. Thank you. So they break down the land uses into suburban and urban. I would have to look back. There aren't a bunch of warehouse type uses such as this within an urban environment, but we utilize the suburban portion of the land use code.
Did you identify whether there were any 1 million square foot warehouses in suburban locations that were included in the data that you used for trip generation?
Did I specifically identify that? No, I banked it on the fact that ITE provided a suburban land use for warehousing to be utilized.
Okay, but do you know the sizes of the warehouses that ITE had in their data that resulted in the numbers that you used for your trip generation?
It's a variation. There's a plethora of data available within the land use codes. I do not know, but give me a second. I may have that information. So I do not have that information.
Do you know if that's information you could get?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. You indicated earlier that there was some documentation indicating that the bridge closure did not impact traffic levels on Randolph Road. Do you recall what you saw?
It was a letter prepared by McDonough and Ray, identifying that their counts were accurate and were typical of the surrounding area, that the bridge being out did not impact them. Other than that, I'm going to look for it. I have the information, but that's all I can recollect at this point.
Did they do a comparison of their counts when they were doing the 40 Arnold site to this site, or was it just a general statement that they think it was consistent?
I can't answer that.
Okay. But you did know that the bridge was closed at the time that this traffic study was done?
I don't believe that's true.
Okay. Did you do anything to verify that?
No, I based my opinion on the signed documentation from McDonough and Ray saying that the traffic patterns and traffic counts were acceptable.
Okay, and would it be fair to say that if the bridge was closed at the time that their traffic study was done, that their statement would be inaccurate?
I think the traffic patterns might be different if the bridge was closed at the time of the counts.
Okay. If the bridge was closed at the time of the counts, would that necessarily create some deviation in the data that you're relying on to establish levels of service based on expected trip generation and existing trips?
It's a hypothetical. I believe that the data that we've utilized in here is correct, so.
But if it's incorrect and you don't know whether the bridge being closed was it a fact, or if it affected traffic, would you have to redo your entire analysis?
I think I would need to look in whether or not the data that's utilized as the base of our traffic study is valid, which I believe that it is, and I believe it's been documented that it is.
Right, but that's based on what you said was they told you that the bridge was in fact open and didn't impact their numbers. And if they were wrong about that, would that put the whole study into question?
I don't believe that they were wrong.
Well, I'm not asking what you believe. I'm saying if they were wrong.
Well,
And
I
in
think-
fact, the bridge was closed and it was impacting traffic levels on that road, would you have to redo the whole study?
No,
Why not?
because I believe that the traffic numbers within the study are correct.
Well, how would you know? How do you know
Because
what you
there's
don't?
documentation that I've agreed to provide to the board.
And I'm asking you to assume that, because you told me that the documentation is based on an assumption that the bridge was in fact open. If
Excuse me,
that's
I don't
wrong-
think he said it was an assumption. He said he relied on documentation. That's not the same as an assumption.
Okay. Well, if in fact the bridge was closed when these numbers were generated, assume that as a fact, would you have any degree of confidence in the numbers in your report?
If the numbers in the report are not what they said, then we would have to relook at things.
And if the numbers in the report were taken at a time when a bridge that is an access to that area of the township for a large neighborhood south of that area, would you find it fair to say that those numbers are probably not accurate,
I believe that the numbers are accurate within the study.
regardless of whether
Based,
traffic was
based on the knowledge that
altered?
I have, that I'm telling you, the numbers within the study as the basis are accurate. And to me, then the study and the analysis within the study are accurate portrayal of the project's impact.
Okay, so you're going to say that they're accurate regardless of whether the bridge was closed or not and traffic patterns were altered?
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, based on the information that I have, that traffic data, that's the basis of the report, is accurate.
Okay, and if you got data that indicated that the bridge was closed and traffic patterns were altered, would you still have the same answer?
I would need to look at that information, but that's not the opinion that I have.
Okay. So with the ITE information that you got to generate your trip generation numbers, did you get any information as to what time of year that those sites with warehouses were collected?
No, that data is not available.
So is what you get something like you put in a code and then they tell you within 3 categories, within urban, suburban, or rural, they give you a number, or do they describe a site?
So the trip generation manual is about a 1,000-page manual that's broken down into individual land uses. And within each land use, you are provided trip generation rates for that type of land use. And we utilize the square footage that's proposed, we plug that in, and we obtain trip generation projections for the proposed use.
Okay, so is my understanding, because I looked into it a little bit, is my understanding that the information that ITE generates those numbers from is from reports that are provided by developers based on their actual, what occurs after they build a site?
Yes, that's a fair assumption. They're
Okay.
usually conducted by transportation engineers.
Are the transportation engineers providing a number based on their trip generation projection or based on what actually occurs after the site is built?
What actually occurs after the site is built?
Have you engaged in any studies of any of the warehouse projects that you've been involved with to determine if the numbers that you were projecting in your report before it was built was similar to what actually occurred?
I have worked on not necessarily warehouses, but more commercial developments. Yes, we have. We submit data to ITE.
Okay, so you don't have any information on whether the numbers you projected for warehouse developments actually pan out to be what actually happens, based on your experience?
No, I rely on the continual updating of the trip generation manual by ITE to keep data current and to reflect any changes and trends of different land uses.
Okay, do you have any idea of how many self-reportings ITE received for its warehouse category?
I do not.
So it could be they are basing the numbers they give you on one project?
There is that possibility. It's not the case for warehouse.
Well, you said you don't know.
I couldn't tell you exactly. I can tell you that it's more than one. We typically don't utilize land use codes that only have one study. It's cautioned by the ITE not to utilize ones that only have one study. I can tell you in the 20 years I've been doing this, they've been constantly updating ITE standards. And so there are probably thousands of studies that go into the warehouse land use. I can't tell you the exact number, but I can tell you it's not 2, it's not 10.
Well, is there a minimum number that they would have to have before they would create a category and generate a number?
No, there are some within there that for certain peak hours, they might not, they might say there's only 3 studies, caution using this information.
Okay, and did you get any type of questions at all with regard to the warehouse
Absolutely not.
category? So you think it's more than 1, you think it's more than 2, but you don't really know how many that ITE used to base its number that it gave you as a trip generation number?
I do not know the number off the top of my head.
Okay. And did you see any of, well, let me go back. When ITE gets a number, do they request a narrative about the type of project, the location, anything of that nature that would describe it for you so you know it's similar to what you're envisioning?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Right, you submit the location, you submit the times the counts were conducted, you submit the square footage and any other independent variables you might have, and you report that to the ITE.
Okay. And when ITE gives you a number, or when you got that number for ITE, did you ask for any of the submissions that underlay that number?
That's not the way it works.
Okay, so you didn't?
That's just not the way that works. We purchase the trip generation manual from ITE, and then we utilize that as a transportation professional to generate traffic for projected uses.
Okay, well, if you had concerns, would it be possible for you to go to ITE as a member and say, can I have the underlying data to look at?
I can tell you for warehouse use, I have no concerns with the data that's within the trip generation
All
manual.
right. My question was different. My question was, if you had concerns, could you ask for the underlying data?
Each projection has footnoted who submitted the data. I don't know if I could go back and actually get the information from them.
Okay, so you didn't see any on this as far as the types of projects, where they were located, the time of year when the study was done, any other physical characteristics that might affect the trip generation?
No, I utilized, as is prescribed by the ITE and, the national guidelines, the trip generation rates for warehousing.
So that would be correct, that you didn't get any of the underlying data?
No, I did not.
So you can't, as you sit here today, say that your project is similar at all to anything that's within the ITE data, because you don't know other than some square footage number, correct?
I can say that this is a typical warehousing development that ITE defines as Land Use Code 150.
And do you have any idea of the year that the data that ITE is using was put in for the project, or when those projects were developed?
As I stated, it's a continually updated database. About every couple years, they update the rates. So there's data continuously being submitted to ITE.
And do you know if any of the warehouse data that ITE uses was given to them in the last 5 years?
I don't know that information.
Okay. Do you know if it was in the last 10 years?
I don't know that information.
Okay. Would you, if the data that they were relying on was older than 10 years old, be concerned about using it?
I think it would need to be verified against the other data that's collected more currently.
And since you don't know if that data was older than 10 years, did you do anything to ensure that it was updated and current?
You know what, so let me backtrack a little bit. I found the cover sheet for Land Use 150 warehousing out of the ITE Trip Generation Manual, 10th edition. It says, time of day distribution for the land use for the 13 general urban suburban sites with data, the overall highest peak hour. I'm talking too fast. I'm sorry. I apologize.
For the 13 urban.
Urban suburban sites with data, the overall highest vehicle hours during the AM and PM weekday were counted between 11:30 and 12:30. The sites were surveyed in the 1980s, the 1990s, the 2000s, and the 2010s in California, Connecticut, Minnesota, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, Oregon, Pennsylvania, and Texas.
Now, you also, as part of the report, you based the traffic from the site on the adjacent street system, on the directional distribution that was identified in the traffic impact study that was prepared by McDonough and Ray, is that correct?
We utilized the initial distribution model that was prepared by them.
Okay, and the initial distribution model is based on what they observe as far as where cars are turning at different intersections?
No, it's based on the location of primary travel routes. It's based on census information of where people within Howell work. It's and based on that and the adjacent roadway network, vehicles are routed out to the surrounding roadways.
Okay, so with that aspect of this study, you're assuming that traffic coming onto the site, new generated traffic, is going to have the same distributional pattern as the existing traffic in the area?
No, not necessarily. It's based on, like I said, the primary highways that the type of use this warehouse is going to be oriented toward, which is 195. It also takes into account the population centers of where employees that would be coming to the site could be working. I believe it was further based on a distribution that was reviewed and approved by the board as part of the 41 Randolph project.
Well, is 41 Randolph likely to have similar traffic patterns?
Yes, I believe it is. It's a warehouse development.
But does 41 Randolph know what type of occupant it's going to have?
Not to my knowledge.
So with you not knowing the type of occupants that are going to be in this building, is it in any way accurate that you know where the traffic is going to come from to either work at the warehouse or to be bringing products to the warehouse?
Yes, I mean, the reason, one of the reasons we're located here is its proximity to 195 and the corridor, the interstate system. And so vehicles and trucks are oriented towards 195. So I think we can accurately predict that the truck traffic's heading in that direction. Further, we can take a look at where people work, where people are coming from, and make projections on how they're going to arrive at the site.
But how can you do that before you know who the tenants are or who are the employees going to be?
Because it's based upon census data of where people in Howell work. It's also based on where population centers are, and it's based on the roadway network that will distribute you back to this area.
Okay, so what towns and census data did you look at to determine where the traffic is going to be coming from?
I don't
Did
have
you
that.
just
I don't
look at
have that
Howell?
information.
Did McDonough and Ray do that?
I don't have that information.
Okay, so you don't know really where the traffic is going to be coming from for people in passenger vehicles going to this site. Is that correct?
I do, based upon the distribution model that was provided to us, I do have a degree of confidence in the fact that we know where the people are going to be coming to and from.
Now, given that we've established tonight that these buildings can also be used to a limited extent for retail space, would it be true to say that that would bring an additional factor of traffic to the site that isn't
Excuse me, Ms.
accommodated?
Horn, could you put the mic closer to your mouth? I think people in the back are having a tough time hearing you.
Okay.
Thank you, that's better.
Given that there's a potential for retail use at least some portion of these warehouse buildings, would it be fair to say that that brings in another aspect of traffic into the site that is not accommodated within your modeling?
No, I think that's something that could be encompassed within the Land Use Code 150.
And why do you think that?
I think that within the studies and within the utilization of a possible warehouse, you might have a showroom that's kind of contemplated by the ordinance here. And so I think that could fall very easily within the land use code that we utilized.
Okay, but again, since you didn't get any of the underlying data, you don't know if that was accommodated in the land use code or the types of projects that were included in that code, correct?
No, I'm utilizing my traffic engineering knowledge and the experience that I have designing these type of sites.
Okay, but your experience doesn't tell you whether ITE within their data had any warehouses that were also utilized as retail space, did?
I think it's contemplated that there could be showroom uses, such as what the ordinance sets forth within the ITE data.
Okay, that's something that you think, but you don't know.
It's my opinion, my professional opinion, yes.
Now, with regard to the parking on the site, does the site plan contemplate the length of a double trailer truck ever coming onto the site and being able to make all these turns and park?
So a tandem truck actually has a better turning radius than a WB67 getting in and out, so they could access the site.
Now, tandem truck is longer than the regular truck, correct?
I believe so. I'd have to double check that.
Okay, and did you use a 53-foot long trailer as the basis for your design?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and do you know how long a double trailer can be?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Okay. Is a 48-foot a standard length for a trailer?
Yes.
Okay, so if you double that and then you add the cab, it would be over 100 feet?
I don't think you can make that assumption that the 48-foot is the tandem.
Do you know if any double trailers are permitted on any roads near the project?
I don't know the answer to that.
Did you look at the 2019 large truck map for New Jersey to determine if any of the roads nearby allow double trailers?
I did not.
Okay, would that be something that this development would prohibit? Is it contemplated at all?
If it were not permitted along the roadways to the site, then it's not something that we could accommodate here.
Ms. Osborne, how much longer do you think?
Well, I can ask the rest of my questions when he comes back with his other data, but I have a few more questions.
Would you mind if we continue this at the next meeting?
Not at all, that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
All right, at this time, I mean, there's other people who want to also to ask questions, all right? We're gonna call it here. I said I was gonna stop it at a hard stop at 10:30, which is the time it is right now. Clearly, the applicant is bringing the traffic engineer back. You wouldn't want to miss this, would you, Mr. Taylor? Eileen, when,
Mr. Chairman, I think you should explain to them that the public portion's not closed.
yes, I told them they will be able to come back and ask questions of the traffic engineer at
They're
the next
asking
meeting.
about comments, I think, when they'll have a chance to
Oh,
make comments.
So I thought I had explained this at the beginning. What we're doing is the applicant is going through witness by witness. I believe her next witness after the traffic engineer is going to be her planner. And then, do you have any other witnesses beyond that? Do you know of right now?
Not at this time. We
All right.
reserve the right to call others in rebuttal.
Sure. So, once we go through the planner, and we do the same thing that we ask questions of the planner, the attorney for Hope then gets to ask, well, he will be able to ask questions at the next meeting when the traffic engineer comes back, but then he will be able to ask questions of the planner also. Then you will be able to ask questions of the planner. If that's the applicant's case at that point, the attorney for Hope can then put on his case, and he will be able to call his witnesses. The applicant will be able to cross-examine his witnesses, just like he's doing to them. And at that point, the public, when that's all done, I will open it up to the public, and that's when you can stand up and you can say anything that you want. And I would add, I will not hold you to a time, other than I will ask you to make it reasonable. Maybe 10 minutes at the max, all right? I will not cut anybody off, and I will not ram this through. I will give everyone the opportunity to speak as long as they want, within reason, all right? And to ask as many questions as they want. Are there any questions on the procedure? Yes, sir. Procedure. Well, that's what I was just starting to discuss right now. Let me just, September
19th?
September 19th is going to be the next meeting where this application is going to be discussed, okay?
I need an extension of time on the record?
Through the 19th,
Can you give us a couple more days, just,
not without speaking to the client.
is your client here that you can ask them?
He's not.
He's not. All right, I guess we'll have to take it through the extension of time. This is simply a discussion about the applicant has to give us an extension of time because the application has to be heard within a certain time frame. This does not affect anything dealing with you. This is just how much time we have. All right, so council extension of time through September 19th.
Correct.
All right. Now, with respect to written questions that be submitted, that's not our procedure. If you want questions, to ask questions, you have to be here. Other than people who are represented by the attorney for Hope, they have to submit all their questions to that attorney.
September 19th, will it just be this application or other ones?
Right now, it is only this application. And seeing that we have quite a bit to go through, I'm going to do my hardest to not schedule anything for that night other than this application. But again, procedurally, we do have to hear other applications at some point. All right, so can you please make the official
September 19th, 7. Chairman, is 7 o'clock or 7:30?
7?
Okay, I'm going to be making what's called, we're carrying the application. Just let me get the application case number SP-1052 Monmouth Commerce Center, which we've just heard, is being carried on notice to the board's meeting scheduled for September 19, 2019, at 7 p.m. in this room. By carrying it on notice, that means there will be no further mailed notice, nor will there be any further published notice. So Monmouth Commerce Center, the next hearing, September 19th, 7 p.m., this room. Thank you.
Okay. No notice. All right. So you don't have to give him notice. He's doing the notice now. Can I have a motion? No, it's not a regular meeting. It's a special meeting.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, a motion to,
Can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Tannenhouse, Mr. Boyle, second, and it's unanimous.
So you will see me Thursday, okay?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Steve.
I'll take a look at